When you think about your future, you know what calls to you. Meaningful work, happiness, growth, and sharing these values with others. But how will you find all of that? There are many paths forward, including one you may not have considered. The military provides countless opportunities to pursue your calling, where you can be part of something bigger than yourself, while still being yourself and having the future you want. You have a calling, we have an answer. Learn more at todaysmilitary.com.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Nicole Byer, helping you make those rooms flyer. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild! Like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Ooh, fierce! This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
Hey, warmer from Evo! Welcome to Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now part of the Easton Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, Blake Lovell, who does such good work over at Southeastern 14. He's going to be aboard. We're going to be taking a look at the SEC tournament, all the nuances with that, some of the teams that he's looking at here in championship week in terms of the intrigue/lack of intrigue that we might be finding, teams that he's a little bit bullish/bearish on as well. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we will fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @G_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Now, fortunately, I don't have really a lot of time for questions today. I'm recording this at 11:30 p.m. Pacific time. This needs to be up by midnight, so I've only got about 10 or so minutes for the recap. Do want to inform you guys, though, that if you're looking for everything that we do here at VSiN for free, go to VSiN.com/champweek. You get a free preview of everything that we're doing leading into the NCAA tournament. You get a nice NCAA tournament primer. You get to see all my handicap lines as they're happening in real time as well, because I actually do update these as these games go all throughout the day. So we've got you guys covered there, and like I said, I only got about 10 or so minutes for this recap, so it's going to be a little bit shorter. I might be cutting out a few results that we saw for Wednesday, but we saw a massive day in college basketball on Wednesday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
I must say, most notable result of the day was the fact that Villanova very nearly loses to DePaul. Villanova, a 1-point win as they were 24.5-point favorites in this game. 58-57 the final. DePaul had been one of the sorriest teams against the spread in all of college basketball. They were lighting your money on fire just all throughout the campaign. So nice to see them be able to rise up a little bit more. It's a DePaul team that is going to be ending the season 11-20-1 against the spread, as for Villanova, just everything went wrong in this one. 11-35 from three-point range. And quite frankly, if DePaul hits a few bunnies, they lose this game outright. Villanova lost the turnover battle 10-7. They lose the rebound battle 37-33. Eric Dixon had 21 points, and then Justin Moore, he was able to give you more towards the back half of the game. He had a big three-pointer with seconds remaining to be able to get the job done, but man, that was a little bit strange to say the least. You saw Providence just completely dump truck Georgetown by a count of 74-56. Not too much of a surprise there. It's been a very, very rough year for our good friends over there at Georgetown against the spread. They're going to be concluding this year 13-19. And then you did see Xavier take down a Butler, this by a count of 76-72. Been a very hot and cold year for both of these teams. For Butler, they go just 8 of 26 from 3 points, so they had their issues there. So now Xavier, their honor is they get to go up against UConn. So that's going to be a little bit of a task there. We did see to end the day on Wednesday, by the way, because I had to be a little bit wishy-washy when I did the preview of this one. CSUN They have been one of the most profitable teams in all of college basketball. They end UC Santa Barbara this year, 87-84, the final, and for UC Santa Barbara, one of the biggest disappointments in all of college basketball. They wrap up the year 10-17-1 against the spread. I thought they were going to be able to win the Big West this year, but CSUN, they're now 21-9 against the spread. They have been just a money maker for you, 8 of 19 from 3-point for them, as Deshaun Ellen-Ikens was able to supply 23 points. You also had 24 big ones in this game out of Keontae Jones, so they survived. They advance out there in the Big West tournament. Saw some intrigue in the ACC tournament, including a Clemson team, of which Selection Sunday might be very interesting for them. They lose to Boston College by a count of 76-55, and all of a sudden Boston College is getting white hot in this tournament. It's been a team that hasn't made you a lot of money this year, 15-18 against the spread, but for Boston College, you've had Quentin Post in the post be very rock solid for this team, as in this one, he was able to give the team just 11 points, as it was actually Claudio Harris along Jaden Zachary, who went wacky Zachy with a combined 49 points. And for Clemson, 4 of 20 from 3-point range. PJ Hall had 21 points, and the rest of the team delivered a turd. So that was not necessarily too tremendous. It has been really rough for a lot of these teams against the spread out there in the ACC, including Syracuse, going a nice hearty 13-19 against the spread. They get lambasted by NC State by a count of 83-65 for NC State. They go 7 of 20 from 3, 20 of 24 at the free throw line. They were able to get 18 big points in this one out of Jaden Taylor, and a guy in Michael O'Connell has been very passive. He was able to take a little bit more hold with regards to his offense. One of the top 100 teams in all of college basketball this season has been Maryland, and we got one more chance to bet their unders, as they're going to be taking on Wisconsin on Thursday. For Maryland, they're able to get the win, they're able to get the cover against Rutgers, who ends the year 22 unders to just 10 overs. It's been rough for this Rutgers offense. 65-51 the final. This game was a complete and utter eyesore, as for old Maryland, they go 7 of 20 from 3-point range. Rutgers 5 of 21 from distance. Rutgers actually wins the turnover battle 18-11, but they got plowed on the glass 45-33, and their season is not going to be continuing, and the season for Michigan is over. Thank goodness gracious. 66-57. They lose to Penn State, and for Michigan, 8-24 against the spread for them. Only Old Dominion and Pacific had a worse against the spread record. And for this Penn State team, ever since Kanye Cleary has been out of the fold, this team has actually played better. They go 7-17 from 3-point range, a little bit of a slog of a game, but they were able to win the turnover battle 15-10. They lose the rebound battle 42-32, which that's just what Penn State does, but they find a way to be able to get the job done here, and not being able to find a way to get the job done is Missouri. They end the year 9-23 against the spread. They fall to Georgia by a count of 64-59, a complete offer for Missouri in conference play. As for Georgia, they go 12 of 29 from 3-point range, so relatively solid result out of them. And then another team that has been really rough against the spread, by the way, that'd be Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin. They entered into the night 9-20 against the spread, and it took a buzzer 3 for them to be able to survive and advance out there in the WAC tournament, but they do take down Abilene Christian, this by a count of 60-57. They close in a lot of places between 2.5 and 3. Depends upon your number as to whether or not they got a cover or not, but I mean, this game was grody and gross. You saw a combined 35 turnovers in this game. Abilene Christian, 22 of them. Stephen F. Austin, 13. And Stephen F. Austin, they lose the battle on the glass 37-25, but they did have Latrell Jostle be able to chuck in their 17 points, so they're able to advance in the tournament. And for Cal Baptist, they get back Dominique Daniels, their top scorer. They win and cover in overtime, 74-63 the final. This was a 60-60 game at the end of regulation, and then things just completely fell off the rails for Utah Valley, so that was a rough one for them as a 5.5-point favorite, and things completely went off the rails for Cal. Stanford is going to live to be able to fight another day in overtime, 87-76. They take down Cal. Cal was up double figures in this game, and they had a stretch where they scored 2 points in 10 minutes. For Stanford, they win this game despite going 5 of 24 from 3-point range. For Cal, they go 14 of 35 from distance, but they lose the turnover battle 13-11, and they get trucked on the glass. I mean, this despite the fact that Stanford is not a good rebounding team. Maximine Radon, 21 points, 13 rebounds. Fardaws Amick, Jalen Tyson, they combine for about 16 boards, but they lose that battle 53-39. So been rough going out there. It's been rough for Washington under Mike Hopkins, and that era is now done. USC was able to take it to Washington, this by a count of 80-74 as USC 9-22 from 3-point range, and now Boogie Ellis along with Isaiah Collier back in the fold. Very big. They combine for 38 points in this one. If you're taking a look at the Pac-12 as well, UCLA win and cover over Oregon State 67-57 the final in that one, as it's been a rough year all season long for Oregon State. And our DK Network Grade picks, they've been going through a cold stretch the last few weeks, but we got back on track on Wednesday. BYU, nice win and cover over Central Florida by a count of 87-73. For BYU, they were able to go 14 of 30 from three-point range. That is what we like to see, so we're going to look to be able to continue that moving forward. And BYU, now 20-12 against the spread this far this season. Central Florida, by the way, 19-13 against the spread, so good sort of production there. Oklahoma State, they were your worst team against the spread in the conference at 11-19-2 against the spread, but Kansas is starting to slide as well. Without having in the fold Hunter Dickinson along with Kevin McCullough, they get pasted by Cincinnati. 72-52 the final. Kansas went 3 of 20 from three-point range for the Cincinnati team. They only shoot about 38.5% from the floor, but Dan Skillings on 23 field goals, he was able to provide the team with 25 points. And Kansas State, they get the job done against Texas, and Texas is out 12-20 against the spread and very much at risk of perhaps not getting selected on Selection Sunday. I think they should be in, but we shall see. 78-74, the final. Kansas State, they get the job done, going 23 of 31 at the free throw line. For Texas, you had Max Asmus be able to provide 26 points, but outside of he and Ithiel Horton, the rest of the team just did a whole bunch of nothing in general, so that was a little bit rough for them. And then TCU, they win and cover against Oklahoma 77-70. That has been very much a sliding Oklahoma team. And then I have to mention the fact that we had a few bids given out to the NCAA tournament out there in the Big Sky, and congratulations to Montana State. At 17-17, they're going back to the NCAA tournament. They take down Montana by a count of 85-70. This despite the fact that they went just 6 of 23 from three-point range, but Robert Ford was built for tough. 5 steals, 22 points for Montana State. They win the turnover battle 15-3, and then out there in the Patriot League, just an absolute lambasting by Colgate. Minty fresh cover, 74-55. They're able to take down Lehi's. It's been an interesting Patriot League all season long, but Colgate domination by them once again, as Brady Cummings, he was coming along for the ride. He was able to supply the team with 19 points. Like I said, I do have to cut this recap a little bit short, but if you are looking at what we're seeing trend-wise in college basketball, over the last 7 days, more overs than unders. 146 overs to 139 unders. That's a 51.2% hit rate to the over. Meanwhile, favorites, they're hitting at about 48.5% right now. We're seeing these big underdogs like the Paul and company being able to come through, and if you're looking at the overall season results, favorites hitting at 50.5%. Meanwhile, the over, that's hitting at 51%. 2,764 overs to 2,660 under. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Wednesday. Now let's turn it forward to the SEC tournament, what we're going to be seeing on Thursday with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 next, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Brady Peterson, now a part of the Beast Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the Beats and Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, as Blake Lovell. He does such good work over at Southeastern 14, taking a look at this great game of college basketball that we all know and love. And even though the name might say Southeastern 14, he does a great job taking a look at the entire landscape of college basketball. You always hear him during these conference previews that are going to be coming sooner rather than later. It's very weird to be saying that, as the college basketball season, it is starting to wrap up, but it's going to be finishing with a bang. Blake is going to be here for it all, and you're able to follow him on Twitter /X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Oh, I always enjoy it, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining me, Blake. And Blake, as we are doing this, the first few games of the SEC tournament, they are just wrapping up. The marquee teams like Tennessee and company, they are waiting who they are going to be playing. So as of right now, those are some TBD matchups. But how do you take a look at the tenor of the SEC tournament coming in? Because I do feel like as the SEC has went along, there really has been a divide between those top 4 seeds that we are going to be seeing starting to really play towards the back half of the week, as opposed to really the rest of the SEC just fighting to be able to make a run. And in some of these cases, teams that are on the bubble trying to be able to get into the NCAA tournament like an Ole Miss. Yeah,
it's interesting because, when you actually look at the SEC tournament, how it's played out over the past 5 years or so, the top 4 seeds this year are the 4 teams that have won it over the past 5 seasons. And so it's, kind of fascinating to look at. Of course, Alabama's won it twice, but Kentucky's won it back in 2018, which feels like forever ago now, I'm sure, for Kentucky fans who are used to winning this tournament more than anybody. Tennessee's won it. Auburn's won it. Yeah, you look at kind of the top group, and Even South Carolina, I think you certainly look at them and feel like in the right circumstances, I feel like when you look at the top half of the SEC bracket, I mean, South Carolina, I know they're going to play a team in Auburn should they beat Arkansas or Vanderbilt, and beat them by 40. But that was at Auburn. We know things can get out of control there if you're a road team not playing well in Neville Arena. You still feel like the style, though, for South Carolina against teams like Mississippi State, Tennessee, potentially Auburn, if you catch it, as we know, sometimes those teams on the Friday that have been sitting and just kind of waiting can come out a little flat. Yeah, like the top 5 seeds I think are interesting. Then, of course, Greg, I talked about Florida. I know they just came off of this loss to Vanderbilt, but you almost wonder if it's like, did they just finally get that bad loss out of the way? Because they really hadn't had any of those for 2 months since that game they played at Ole Miss. I think the top 6 seeds are fascinating here. Then you can maybe look at a team like A&M who's trying to play their way into the NCAA tournament. You've got a team in Arkansas who seems like they're getting hot at the right time. It seems like one of the more compelling SEC tournaments just from a storyline standpoint that we've seen in a little bit.
Oh, there's no question about it. A lot of those teams are playing on day 1, day 2. They've got talent, but at the same time, they're going to need to win out in order to make the NCAA tournament. We don't know if we're going to have Arkansas or not going into Thursday, but you know what? If we do have Arkansas, that would be all the more intrigue as they have to get by Vanderbilt. And if they don't get by Vanderbilt, boy, we really do have some issues. But I do think that those 2 set matchups for Thursday that we have right now are very interesting in the Mississippi State versus LSU matchup and then Ole Miss versus Texas A&M. And the one that I really circle here is that Ole Miss versus A&M matchup because you got an A&M team that can't shoot threes to save their lives, but they do a tremendous job on the glass. And despite having Jamarian Sharp and Musa Cisse, Ole Miss has not done a good job on the glass at all, but they have shot it really well from three-point range. I'm not sure how you take a look at the Thursday matchup between Ole Miss and Texas A&M, but for one, I think it could be loser leaves town for the NCAA tournament as opposed to the NIT, and two, just 2 strangely different teams in that I thought both would be better in some aspects, but both do have a little bit of a forte of their own.
Yeah, if you're doing kind of a double take on this one, of course, these 2 teams just played, and it was not even close, as we know, Greg. And it's like, I was not expecting that. That was a game where Ole Miss, had a home game. You're thinking, okay, if they beat A&M here, they got a shot to at least get closer to the bubble. They're certainly further away than the Aggies are right now, especially after that loss. But then to come out and lose by 26 at home to a Texas A&M team that you and I have kind of picked on a little bit this season, they don't shoot it well.
They can't shoot.
But yet they come out and hit 13 threes against Ole Miss. Like, I don't know how that happened, but hey, I guess give A&M credit, right time to hit that many threes because they're just not doing it on a regular basis. Here's what's interesting. It's right going 13 to 26 against Ole Miss, 50% from 3. They're still shooting 27.8% from 3 on the year, 360th nationally. So that just kind of shows you. And that's where I think you get these 2 teams now in a neutral court setting. One just beat the other by 26 points. We know how this is going to work out. Like, it's probably going to be a complete grind for both of these teams. Ole Miss had their chance this last time to basically knock Texas A&M out of the field. They're going to get another chance here to do it because I think A&M has to win in order to get in. And as you mentioned, the key stat, Texas A&M out-rebounded Ole Miss by 29 in that game. And you think about the size that Ole Miss plays with. Cisse played 19 minutes. Sharp played 16 minutes. And just, even Brakefield is there, of course. Like, they've got size. Allen Flanagan can rebound. They just got destroyed on the boards. I think you still have to give the edge to A&M here, but like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if this is way closer than it was the previous matchup. You just can't trust either one of these teams, but I think A&M's closer to the bubble, and for them, I think they need one win, and they have a chance at least to get in. But for Ole Miss, this would just be, one step towards what probably needs to be multiple steps to even get back on the bubble.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. They need multiple wins to be able to crack the NCAA tournament field, and I do think that it is so interesting to just take a look at the style and tenor of these 2 teams, as Blake Lovell, who does such good work over at Southeastern 14, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, because if I'm looking at one of these teams that has some more upside, it certainly is Ole Miss, because Ole Miss, they've got the 3-point shooting. They've been able to show that they're able to bust out, have some big offensive performances. But if there's a team that I'm looking at that I feel a little bit better about perhaps making that run in the SEC tournament, I would be going with Texas A&M, because that rebounding is not going to go into a funk. You know that this team is going to defend. You know that they are very well grounded. And Chris Beard is a great coach, but it just hasn't come together from year number 1 at Ole Miss. I think that it's going to come year 2, year 3, and beyond. But I'm not sure how you take a look at teams that can/cannot make a run with regards to these conference tournaments, but I want to be banking on a team that we've seen some consistency all year long, and while it's been consistently bad for Texas A&M on the shooting front, at the very least, you know that their rebounding is going to keep them active in a setting where these guys can get tired very easily.
Yeah, and we always say, too, it's like your guard play in March matters, and, when you look at Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford, you're not going to find kind of a more experienced group out there in terms of, probably Tennessee, of course, with Vescovy and Ziegler and James, all those guys. But you look at the just overall experience of Taylor and Radford in the SEC, even Manny Obaseki, like I said, who just hit 4 threes in the game against Ole Miss. You've got guys who have played in this league. And, again, Wade Taylor was the SEC Player of the Year last year. I know his efficiency numbers have not been as good this year, but he's still a guy who can take over a game at any time. And Radford's the same way. And so when you think about it, you look at where A&M's at in the bracket, and it's like, okay, let's say they beat Ole Miss. Then what happens? Oh yeah, they get that game against Kentucky. And remember, they've already beaten Kentucky one time this year. Now, that was back when Kentucky was virtually not playing much of any defense. They're playing much better these days, but have proven that they can go out and beat Kentucky. And those two guys, I think, in that game combined for 59 of A&M's 97 points, which they won in overtime. But they got contributions from other guys, too, whether it was a Jace Carter, Anderson Garcia, a first-team all-defensive team guy in the SEC, Solo Washington. A&M can be good. That's the thing. It's like they're a 7 seed, but A&M can be a team that can reel off a couple wins. It's just you never know what they're going to do shooting-wise, and that's kind of put themselves in such a bad spot in a lot of these games where they have to be great defensively. And this isn't a truly great defensive team, but they've gotten better. And so I would definitely circle A&M if you're looking for a team that's 7 seed or lower, because I think Florida is going to be a popular pick as a 6 seed. If you're looking for the team 7 seed or lower, probably okay just to stop at the 7 and go with Texas A&M.
And I am so glad that you do mention Florida as well, because they are that team in the SEC that I just take a look at throughout the season, and I've just become a little bit warmer on them in general. They did have that nice win against Alabama, much to the chagrin of myself that there was like 100 billion points scored at the final few minutes of that game. But that said, I take a look at this Florida team. I really like what I'm seeing out of them, and I'm not trying to view them not just for the SEC tournament, but in the NCAA tournament as well. And I think that out of the teams in the SEC, I don't know if they're going to be able to make quite the run of, say, a Tennessee if they're firing on all cylinders, but I think that this team, out of all the teams that we're seeing in the SEC, outside of Auburn, outside of Tennessee, they might be the most well-rounded one in this conference.
Yeah, and two, I think it's, the guard play speaks for itself. We talked about them going into the season. We're like, if 1 through 4, their top 4 guards, which were Walter Clayton, Riley Kugel, Zion Pullen, Will Richard, if those guys are delivering on a night-in, night-out basis, there's not many teams going to be able to match that kind of depth. Now, of course, it's been Clayton and Pullen who have been the main two, I think, in terms of, how they played this season. Like, they are both, in my opinion, like, if you filled out a first-team All-SEC and you had to pick 7 players, which, the league does, we did our own, we're like, which one do we pick? Because I think both of them are that close together in terms of their contributions. But we've also talked about how the big men have developed. I mean, Tyrese Samuel, he's a grown man, right? Like, he's someone who came from Seton Hall, played a lot of basketball there, now comes over to Florida. He's just kind of that double-double guy at any time, and I think his physicality's really helped. But it's also like, a freshman like Alex Condon, other guys, Han Logden, who we've talked about at 7-1. They've got a big front court. They've got guards who are quick. They do a good job offensive rebounding. We talk about A&M. I mean, Florida's right there with them in terms of the percentages offensive rebounding-wise. The one thing, and you said it, and this was what concerned me in the Vanderbilt game and concerned me in some other games they played recently. They've won games, but they are not exactly the same as Alabama. I think Alabama's worse defensively. But Florida still has those stretches where they don't defend very well. And the thing that is a little bit different about Florida is that they don't force many turnovers. And that would worry me for a team that has not been great defensively. Overall, again, they've done enough to get by to get to this point. But if you're going into a tournament setting and you're saying, who do you trust? There are still some things defensively with Florida I don't completely trust. And the fact that they don't make other teams make mistakes, you've got to be really good, to do that, because you're not getting those easy opportunities offensively, which they're fine with. They don't necessarily need them. That's the one thing that would worry me a little bit about this team.
Yeah, but I do think that that's a very fair worry to have about Florida, and I don't know if they're going to be able to win the SEC tournament or anything like that. I think that would be a little bit far-fetched, but certainly do like some of the attributes that we're seeing there, and the guard play throughout the season. It has been getting a little bit better as well, and I do want to put you on the spot here, Blake, since I know that over at Southeastern 14, you guys are doing such a great job of being able to break down this SEC tournament. Who do you have winning the SEC tournament before we ask our traditional question of who you're taking a look at on the national landscape?
Yeah, as always, Greg, I think people always laugh at us because we made it a tradition now. We do our real bracket and then we do our ultimate chaos bracket. Like, it's conference tournament time. You got to have both. You got to have one that you feel like, all right, here's my gut picks, but also here's the wild scenario you could possibly get. So my initial, first bracket, real bracket, I've got Kentucky versus Tennessee in the championship. I just think that it just seems that way. These are the two teams that, to me, are playing the best right now. I think that Tennessee potential Auburn game in the semifinal would be an absolute war between those two teams. When you think about the physicality, how we saw them play, in Knoxville in that game was a great game. But that is also one of the reasons why I like Kentucky's path is because I think that, I mentioned it earlier, that top part of the bracket, I think are just going to beat each other up. Imagine if you get a Tennessee, Mississippi State, Auburn, South Carolina, force them in the top half of the bracket. Those four teams are all very physical. They all defend. And I think that's where, again, throughout a conference tournament, you get beat up a little bit. So that's why I took Kentucky to win the thing, because I think they have the better path to get there, even with what we talked about with A&M. I just think Kentucky matches up well with A&M, Alabama, Florida, their most likely opponents in that part of the bracket. I took the Cats to win it over Tennessee because, again, these two teams, ticket sellers would love to have those two teams in Nashville playing in the championship. And that's why, Greg, my chaos bracket, I decided to say, you know what, if we're going to get chaotic here, what would the ticket sellers absolutely hate? And that would be Tennessee losing to Mississippi State on Friday and Kentucky losing to Texas A&M. So that led me to go with an Auburn and Alabama championship game for the ultimate chaos bracket. And as you'll know as well, Greg, I'd like to reveal this to you. In my chaos bracket, you and I have been very high on our man Dennis Gates. And we know he's had one of the worst luck of any coaches this year for a team that goes over in the SEC. I decided in the chaos bracket I was going to have Missouri beating Georgia and then going on and upsetting Florida to get to the quarterfinals. So that would be the ultimate chaos. I don't think it's going to happen, but we got to get something going for our guy Dennis Gates there. So
they always talk about, they doubled their win total in the conference tournament and things like that. That would be an infinite amount of jump in terms of the wins. You go from 0 to 2. Well, you can't have a multiplier on that when you've got a 0. So that would be interesting to say the least. As man, it has been a rough year for Missouri. As Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 14, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then, Blake, always have to ask you about this because you do such good work. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, you join me for so many conference previews. Who are you taking a look at on the national landscape that you just want to watch this week in terms of these other conference tournaments? Because no doubt about it, the Mountain West tournament is going to be very interesting. I'm very intrigued at those bubble teams out there in the Big East. Not sure what to expect out of the Big Ten conference tournament, but that one always seems to deliver. List goes on and on. What teams are you looking for this week outside the SEC are really catching your eye and really have your intrigue?
I feel like the team that we just all cannot look away from still, despite the fact that it feels like they're a little bit away and they've got to do some work. Like Memphis, Greg, I still have circled. I'm just like, what's going to happen with this Memphis team? Are they going to make this run and all of a sudden just find their way into this thing? Because I know most people kind of have them in that, 5 to 7-ish type range of teams that are out of the mix. But you never know because the talent's there, and obviously we saw them make a little bit of a run towards the end of the season. So, they have been fascinating. We talked about them all season. So I certainly have my eye on the AAC tournament there. And, yes, we have talked about the Mountain West. And, of course, there's a couple teams in that mix. I guess, when you look at just kind of how they could find their way in, find their way out, New Mexico's in that group. I know UNLV was someone that's been mentioned and probably need a couple wins. But still, you just kind of look at the setup of that bracket with the individual matchups you're going to have in those games. So I'm pretty fascinated by that. And then elsewhere, it really is just kind of seeing, as always, it's like we see this every year. There's going to be one of these teams that maybe is even further away than a Memphis or something like that. You mentioned the Big East, teams like that, could be a Providence, whoever. Yeah, who are going to be these teams that make the runs? Because we know there are a lot of teams that feel like, all right, we talk about the Indiana States, right? They've made their case. They, of course, lose the game. They're trying to make their case. But we know, the bid thieves are out there and they're trying to figure out their way into this thing. And that's where, again, a team like Mississippi State, who we talked about earlier, they got to win against LSU or else they're going to put themselves in a really bad spot. A&M kind of in the same situation. Look at all these different setups and it's fascinating, whether it's the Mountain West, whether it's the AAC, whether it's some of those teams in the ACC, like Wake Forest, Virginia, teams that need to do work. Pitt, of course, another one of those teams. This time of year, you can look anywhere and you can find a fascinating storyline, and there are just so many, especially with these bubble teams. And as always, it's going to be the constant debate. It's does an Indiana State get in over one of these teams that maybe wins a couple games in their conference tournament, whether it's the ACC, the SEC, wherever, which one deserves that spot. And we know we're going to have the same debate that we always do. Hopefully, though, I will stick with Mountain West, Greg. Hopefully none of these Mountain West teams get snubbed because, as we've said, it's been such a fun conference this year.
Oh, it certainly has been a fun conference. Hopefully we can get a win or two for New Mexico and they can avoid subbing their toe so that way they're able to get into the NCAA tournament and they're able to get the maximum amount of bids. I know I've seen a lot of people out there being like, oh, the Mountain West, they straight up record the last few years in the NCAA tournament has been terrific, but they've gotten some tough draws and we just saw a team make the national title game last year as well to be able to help them out, just like Blake. You always help me out on this podcast. You do such excellent work taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. So let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Like you said, if you want our SEC stuff, you can find it Southeastern 14, YouTube, any podcast app you use, search for us there. You'll find it. We'll be covering the tournament all week. Should be a lot of fun. Everything else, college basketball related on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake does an amazing job taking a look at this tremendous game of college basketball every single time he joins this show. Lends such good insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, another great day of college basketball conference tournament action. I get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be able to get Blake Lovell aboard. He does such great work over at Southeastern 14, taking a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love. I feel like every single time he joins this podcast makes us all just a little bit smarter, as it has been a wild and crazy year just across college basketball as a whole, but especially out there in the SEC. He has done a great job of being able to decipher what has been very, very hard to decipher, and every single time he joins this podcast, lends his great insight. So big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNet_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is in accordance to tip time in terms of all these conference tournaments. Like, the first conference tournament to tip is going to be the MAC, so they're going to be up first. The next earliest tip time in terms of these conference tournaments, that is going to be the Atlantic 10, and then so on and so forth. So that actually keeps things relatively clean and easy. The two that are at the bottom, those are the smaller conferences, the SWAC and the MEAC. So let's get things started with 7-11, 7-12 on the betting board. This is from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse out there in Cleveland, Ohio, Toledo, and Kent State. Kent State opened up as a 4-point underdog. Now they are about a 5 to a 5.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 151.5, and I did set my line at a 5.5. I think that this is a correct move. Anything of 5 or less, I'm willing to lay it with Toledo, and personally, I did get in on a little bit of an opener myself. This is just not the same Kent State team that we've seen the last few seasons. Kent State has really done a nice job over the last few years, playing good defense, being able to generate turnovers. Just none of that this season, well outside the top 110 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And it's not to say that this Toledo team is some sort of a Mona Lisa Vito team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis themselves, but they just have much more firepower on offense. Jalen Sullinger has been rock solid for Kent State. He shoots in the high 30s from 3-point range. He's able to supply you with about 15.5 points per game, and to the credit of Giovanni Santiago, he was turning the ball over too much at the beginning part of the season. He's been able to clean that up, but has not been the same 3-point shooter that he was a season ago. And for Kent State, the 3-point shooting offense and defense is really where I think this game is going to be made/broken. Kent State is about 162nd in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. To their credit, they actually dropped that to about 32.4% away from home. At home, they are allowing opponents to shoot more like 35.5%, from 3-point range, but this has been a Toledo team that has traveled pretty solidly all season long. They're not quite the number one team in all of college basketball in terms of points scored per possession like they were a season ago, but they shoot 38% from 3-point range at home, 37.7% away from home, headlined by two main scorers, one in which is really able to pop threes, one in which is only shooting about 32%, and Raheem Moss. Dante Maddox is more of your 3-point shooter at 40.8%, throws in their 3 assists, 15.5 points per contest. Moss shoots 32% with 16 points per contest, but the Toledo team I think is going to be able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. Chris Payton for this bunch in Kent State, he's been able to supply you with about 8 or so rebounds per game, but outside of him, you really don't have a lot down low. Silveron Hornbeek has been a bit of a disappointment, has been banged up all season long, so as a result, you've got a Kent State unit that it's about 160th in all of college basketball in terms of total rebound rate. Meanwhile, the Toledo unit, they're checking in about 172nd, so they should be able to hold up there. And the Toledo team also only turns the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, while Toledo is also very, very weak in so many aspects as well. I was alluding to it a bit before. What was the bread and butter of this Kent State team a season ago was being able to generate turnovers, and now you've got a Toledo team that's pretty much on par with Kent State. Kent State, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, after being a top 50 team last season, they're down to about 75th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Toledo, they're about 92nd in the country, generating more turnovers per possession away from home rather than at home. I do think that this is going to be an up and down game. I do think that Toledo gets their tempo, and I think that they're able to keep things cleaner than Kent State to allow them to get the job done. So set Toledo as a 5.5 point favorite, one to lay up to 5 with them, and did so by total 155.5. Even though this is an early game, I typically get bogged down my totals a little bit for these early games. So looking over and looking at Toledo laying up to 5, 7-13, 7-14 on the betting board. Bowling Green and Central Michigan do battle from Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, and it is Central Michigan who's a 2.5 to a 3-point underdog. Totals between a 132 to 132.5. I did set my total 138.5. I'm going to be looking at the over. I think that Bowling Green is really going to be looking to get their tempo in this game against a Central Michigan team that, give them credit, they're in the top 75 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they've been able to do a pretty rock solid job with their defense, but they're just not really rock solid down low. Central Michigan, they are 134th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but much of that success came at home. They are giving up 16.3 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home, and they go up against a Bowling Green unit that they only give up about 0.9 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. And I do think that for Bowling Green, the key is getting their tempo in this game. Central Michigan is going to be looking to slow this thing down, 234th in the country in terms of total possessions bring. Bowling Green under Todd Simon, they're looking to push tempo a little bit more. They're about 96th in the country with this regard. Now, you got two teams that just have not been able to stroke it from 3-point range all season long. Central Michigan, they're shooting 30.2% from 3-point range. Of your top 5 scorers, you've got one guy shooting above 27% from 3-point range. That would be Mr. Derek Butler, who's able to give you 10.5 points per contest, and he's been able to do a solid job recently, 8+ points in each of the last 4 games, and I like Anthony Pritchard, 13 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists, steal half per contest, but she's 27% per 3, and for Central Michigan, even though their rebound rate isn't awful, they don't have a lot of size down low. Each of your top 4 scorers do give you at least 4.2 rebounds per game, but you only have one guy in the roster that gives you north of 5.2 rebounds per game. That'd be 6'6" Brian Taylor. Now you have to go up against Rashawn Agee, coupled with Jason Spurgeon. Both of these guys are very solid down low for Bowling Green, and for Spurgeon at 6'10", 6'11", he's actually been one of the team's top 3-point shooters at 36% from distance, 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per contest, while Agee, he chips in there 10 rebounds per game, but Marcus Hill, he is that do-it-all go-to scorer, being able to supply 20.5 points, 5 boards for a team that they shoot just 30% from 3. Bowling Green, not bad at taking care of the ball, only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per contest, and both of these teams have been able to hold up relatively well on defense. Bowling Green gives it up from 3-point range outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, but again, Central Michigan, not a team that's really lighting it up, and if you look in regulation and regulation only, so this excludes overtime, it is a Central Michigan team that they have not exceeded the 71-point plateau in regulation really ever since the beginning of the month of January. January 13th is the last time they did so, but even with that, I do think that this total is a little bit too low because you do have a Bowling Green team that is pushing tempo, and I do think that this is going to be a game that gets into the high 60s, so set my total more around a 138.5. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the over, and for Bowling Green, set them as a 2.5 point favorite. Now that we're getting to a 3, I'm going to be willing to take 3 with Central Michigan along with this total over 7:15, 7:16 on the betting board. Miami of Ohio and Akron do battle from Ohio, and it's Akron who finds himself themselves as a favorite of 8 points. On this game, 134 to 134.5, and with Akron, I did set them as a favorite of 8 points. So we're going to be trying to see if we can get a little bit of a line movement here, as it's been an Akron team that has been pretty solid with their defense. They're a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you may recall coming into this tournament as a 20-plus point favorite, they lose to Eastern Michigan. I was seeing a few 8.5s out there, and personally, if I had a choice between a 7.5 and an 8.5, I'd rather take 8.5 with Miami of Ohio rather than lay 7.5 with Akron, just because it is an Akron team that is relatively slow tempo, so that does hurt them a little bit. Now, I will say, for Akron, they do a nice job of being able to guard the three-point arc, 24th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but this Miami of Ohio team is 73rd in their own right, and it travels relatively well. Opponents shoot 32.7% from three-point range against them. Now, for Miami of Ohio, you don't necessarily have a lot of star power like you do with Akron. Akron has the top rebounder in all of college basketball, Enrique Freeman, 18 points, nearly 13 boards, a block and a half per contest. He's able to pop threes at a 35% clip. And then from there, you've got Sammy Hunter, Greg Tribble. Both of these guys combined for 20 points, shoot 37% for three. And Ali, when he was on Akron 2 years ago, shot north of 40% for three. That's down to 27% this year. That is bogging down this Akron team and preventing them from being really a top 75 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Miami of Ohio, you have absolutely no rebounding on this team. Now, I will say, for the Akron side of things, even though you do have down low Enrique Freeman giving you north of 12.5 rebounds per game, he's the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per contest, but Miami of Ohio is going to get tossed there. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of their rebound rate, but Anderson Marbeau is someone that is a big man that stands right around 6'8", 300 pounds, 12.5 points, 3.5 boards, does shoot 35% from three-point range, and this Miami of Ohio team is shooting 36.5% from three-point range. They do a relatively solid job valuing the ball, about 11.5 turnovers per game. Akron, a couple fewer turnovers, but Akron also plays a little bit more slowly, and it's really a whole square than some of its parts approach when it comes to this Miami of Ohio team, as currently they've got 10 different guys that give you at least 5.4 points per contest. Part of that is because they've had a few guys be a little bit in/out of the fold, but I do think that with Miami of Ohio's wholesale approach, they're going to do a good job of holding in there. I do think that both of these teams are going to be looking to attack the interior as well, especially this bunch in Akron, as Miami of Ohio does leave themselves very open to giving up some two-point shots with the way that they don't necessarily have a lot of size, the way that they have just been functioning in general, and it is an Akron team. I do think it's going to be able to get a little bit more online on this front, but they are also about 207th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, while Miami of Ohio more on 155th. So at an 8.5 or more, I'm going to be looking at those points with Miami of Ohio, and did set my total 136, as I do think that both of these teams have a few hiccups on defense. So looking at the over, and at 8.5 or more, looking at those points with Miami of Ohio. 7-17, 7-18 on the betting board. Ohio, the Bobcats are going to be playing against Western Michigan. Western Michigan is an 8.5 to a 9-point underdog with your total 147, and did set my total 142. I'm going to be looking at the under for the entirety of the season. This has not been a great defensive effort from Miami of Ohio, but if you look at the way that they're coming into this tournament, they've really been able to hunker down. It's a Ohio team that in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis overall for the season, it has been a little bit less than savory going up against Western Michigan team that, though they play slowly, it's not like they play great defense either. Western Michigan, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are checking in right around 254th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for this Ohio unit, it's more in that neighborhood of about 154th. But again, if you take a look at this Ohio team, they've given up 68 points or fewer in now 5 out of their last 7 games. And they go up against a Western Michigan team that, if there's a team that I really feel like is not worthy of being in this tournament, it is them, as they just haven't been able to do it on the offensive end either. Western Michigan is currently checking in 228th in the country in terms of their overall three-point shooting percentage. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they are well outside the top 225 on that front, as well as they got a little bit of a spark when Javonte Brown, the 7-footer, came into the fold. He's been able to give you about 9 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, and you've got Titus Wright, who's been able to be Mr. Wright down low. He's able to supply you with about 5 rebounds per game, but for Western Michigan, it's just all over the place. They rely too much on Seth Hubbard, who gives you 14 points per contest for offense. Meanwhile, Ohio, it's a little bit more spread out. You've got essentially 4 different guys who give you at least 9.2 points per contest. Miles Brown, along with AJ Clayton, both shoot 41.5% from three-point range. And then you've got Jalen Hunter and Sharif Mitchell. They have been able to combine in the backcourt for a little bit over 27 points. Hunter's your main facilitator with 5 assists, but Mitchell and Hunter combined for 3 steals per contest as well. In Ohio, they just keep things clean in the top 40 in all of college basketball in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And when it comes to being able to hit the glass as well, it is an Ohio team that they don't necessarily have that one guy down low that is going to be able to take over a game. They don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. A.J. Clayton and his 4.5 rebounds per game, that is a top mark. But despite the fact that Western Michigan has all sorts of size and they're 83rd in the country with regards to rebound rate, they're not very strong on the interior with regards to their defense, so they'll be able to grab a few more rebounds than an Ohio team that's clocking in 270th on this front. But Beardis White has been all sorts of inconsistent in the backcourt as well, and for this Ohio team, just been very impressed by the way that they've been able to fortify things, hold things down. Perhaps things were a bit of a product of them playing lesser competition towards the back half of the season, but last time they gave up north of 67 points in a game, you have to go back to February 16th. I do think that they do a nice job locking down this Western Michigan team, and I do think that they're going to be able to get it done, though. Again, with the rebounding issues, I do think that even though the Ohio defense is going to be able to hold up, that's going to allow Western Michigan to be somewhat lively in this game. I set my number at 8, so you're at an 8.5 to a 9. I think we've gone too far. I'm willing to take those points with Western Michigan, and with this total, set mine at a 142, so also looking at the under. Now we go to Barclays Center for the A10 tournament. 719, 720 on the betting board. Richmond and St. Joe's are going to be doing battle. Richmond is a favorite of 2.5 points. Your total on this game, it is 141.5 to 142, and I did set Richmond as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm seeing a few straight 2s out there, and at a 2, I'm willing to lay the number. Richmond has just been such a good defense all season long, in the top 40 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. One bugaboo that Richmond has is that they are going to be outgunned on the glass, this Richmond team, in terms of their rebound rate. They're outside the top 250. This despite the fact that they do have 2 guys that are very solid on the glass. Neil Quinn, who is a 7-footer that's able to give you right around about 4 assists per contest. Very versatile. He does chip in there about 6.5 rebounds per game. Isaac Bigelow, he's been able to give you about 5.5 boards per contest as well. Has some relatively good versatility, but you do take a look at the flip side for St. Joe's. They should be able to win that battle with having down low Rasheer Fleming give you about 7 rebounds per game. Grace Edasonko, hopefully I said that correctly. I always have a tough time with that one. He's back in the fold and a little bit of a limited capacity, but overall for the season, giving you 6 rebounds per game, probably not going to be able to get quite that with his minutes restriction. But St. Joe's, they also did a nice job dishing out the ball. Xavier Brown, Lynn Greer, they're combining for about 7 assists, 24.5 points per contest, while Brown does shoot 43% from 3, and Eric Reynolds does shoot 39% from the outside, but best scorer in this game, that belongs to Richmond. Jordan King, he has been the king. 18.5 points on 42.5% three-point shooting, and is the main guard on a Richmond team that is in the top 10 nationally in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They just do such a good job of being able to maximize these possessions, and for Richmond, as a team in a road and neutral court environment, they shoot 38.5% from three-point range. That is a top 12 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, this is just a St. Joe's team that, for 1, doesn't travel as well, and for 2, for St. Joe's, they were a really good defense in the first 3 or so months of the season. Since late January, early February, this team has been outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They entered into this tournament with opponents shooting 36.2% from three-point range in a road/neutral court environment against them. Both of these teams have their depth issues with St. Joe's, with Edasonko dealing with that little bit of an injury that's been hurting them a little bit. But that said, I do think that Richmond, in a relatively slow and controlled environment, as Richmond, well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, they get it done. And I do think that deep down inside, you're going to see this St. Joe's team be able to play a little bit more defense. But I do think that wearing on them just a little bit is the fact that this is a little bit more of a bunch that just doesn't have a lot of depth. I do think that that's going to have to cause them to be a little bit slower, a bit more out of sorts, and that allows Richmond to be able to take this one with their overall efficiency. So, did set Richmond as a 2.5 point favorite, want to lay up to 2 with them. Set my total more around a 140.5. So, here at the 142, 142.5, also looking at the under. 721, 722 on the betting board. VCU and UMass do battle, and this is a pick'em game with your total between 141.5 and 142. With VCU in this pick'em line, I'm willing to take them. I set VCU as a 2 point favorite, so would be willing to lay up to 1.5 here. It's a VCU unit that has been able to do a relatively solid job with their 3-point shooting defense, a top 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And for VCU, even though they don't have the star rebounders like UMass does, this is a top 75 team in the country in terms of rebound rate. Toby Lawl's really the lone guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, 7.5 points, 6 boards, about a block per contest. But Max Shoga, on a team that has been all sorts of banged up, has been the main constant. 3.5 assists, 5 boards, 15 points per game. That's part of it as well. With this VCU team, they have been injured throughout much of the season. They're finally able to hit their peak now that everyone is really fully healthy for the team. Zeb Jackson is able to give you out 3.5 assists, a little bit of a steal per contest. Joe Basmili, who missed the first 10 or so games of the season, he's shooting 40% from 3 with 14 points per contest. And then on the UMass side of things, they do have the top 2 rebounders in this game, Josh Cohen, Matt Cross. He combined for 15 rebounds, and between the two of them, about 31.5 points per contest. And VCU, no doubt about it, they're a little bit more vulnerable on the interior than they are with regards to their three-point shooting defense. But that said, I do think that they're going to be able to hold up here against a UMass team that, though they don't pop a lot of threes, they're only shooting about 31.5% from three-point range. Rashul Diggins has been able to give you about 12 or so points per contest. He's been able to do a solid job on that front. But even though VCU isn't quite that same team from the exterior that they are the interior, and this is still a VCU team that is 42nd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and that compares to a UMass team that's right around about 49. So even though UMass has more size, UMass is allowing a higher percentage from two-point range rather than this VCU team. I do think that VCU is going to be able to utilize that defense. They do a nice job of being able to just keep things in check. They do turn the ball over. VCU does about 12 times per contest. That's a bit more than a UMass team that is a bit more up-tempo, but with VCU having more outside shooting presence and this UMass team not turning steals quite the same way right now as they did towards the beginning part of the season, I do think that this is going to be a slog. You've got a UMass team as well that has failed to break the 70-point plateau in each of their last 4 games now. Credit to them. They have given up 67 points or fewer for their last 5 games, so they've really been able to do a masterful job there. But I do think that this is going to be a slow grinder, nip and tuck sort of game. Semi-total at 140, so I like the under. I like VCU on this pick'em line. 723, 724 on the betting board. It is Loyola Chicago, and they are going to be taking on St. Bonaventure. This is a game that literally just went final between St. Bonaventure and LaSalle before I came on, so there are no numbers up on this one. But that said, I've got my handicap all ready to go. I set St. Bonaventure as a 1.5 point favorite and made my total 135.5. So if St. Bonaventure is any sort of an underdog, I'm going to look at them on the money line / I'm willing to lay a point with them. Would need at least 2 points to take the points with Loyola Chicago, and then 135 or less, looking at the over 136 or higher to the under. It's a Loyola Chicago unit that they're just a different team when they leave home rather than when they are at home. This Loyola Chicago team has all season long been one of the better defenses that you're going to find in all of college basketball. 16th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they are giving up 16.6 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And the St. Bonaventure unit, they're just a little bit more consistent in general. They give up more like 4.2 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home. And for Loyola Chicago, what is very glaring about this team is the three-point shooting defense. They allow opponents to shoot just 31.1% from three-point range at home. That balloons up to 38.2% when they're away from home, while the Bonnies, they actually allow a lower three-point shooting percentage away from home rather than at home, about 32.5% away from home, more like 33.7% at home. And got a Loyola Chicago team that they're a little bit more prone to turning the ball over as well. St. Bonaventure, they've got so many guys that have been around, like Moses Flowers, Charles Pride. This is one of the oldest teams in all of college basketball. They only turn the ball over about 10.7, 10.8 times per contest. Loyola Chicago, in terms of turnovers per possession, outside the top 240 with that regard. You've got Desmond Watson, you've got Philip Olsen. They combine for about 25.5 points per contest. And for Loyola Chicago, if you look at the overall rebound rate numbers, they're actually quite good, but I feel like this is a little bit misleading and it's a little bit strange because Loyola Chicago, they're 93rd in the country in terms of their rebound rate. They don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you north of 4.6 rebounds per game. That'd be Watson. Meanwhile, for St. Bonaventure, it's not like you've got anyone that down low is going to be giving you like 10 or so rebounds or anything like that. These are not the Oshonu Shuni days for them, but that said, you've been able to get Charles Pride to be able to give you about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game. Chad Venning gives you 14 points, 5 boards, and between Mike Adams, Woods, Pride, and Flowers, they combine to shoot north of 42% from three-point range. The man formerly known as Jan Farrell Issa Movius, I can't say that name correctly to save my life. He's been stepping up a little bit more down low as well. He's been able to supply the team with 4+ rebounds in each of the last 3 games, as well as become a little bit more of a rim protector. And for the St. Bonaventure team, the way that they protect the ball, the way that they are a top 45 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and it's been able to travel relatively solidly. They do take a little bit of a drop-off when they're away from home rather than when they are at home, but all in all, I do think that they're going to be able to do a better job of hitting the road here than the Loyola Chicago. And last time these two teams played, this was out there in St. Bonaventure's home arena, 79-64. They were able to get the win. I do think that the three-point shooting, because the Bonnies, they were incredibly hot that day, it's going to cool down a little bit. So 135 or less, looking at the over 136 or higher to the under, but with St. Bonaventure, won't take them as a money line underdog, /1 to lay up to a point, would need at least 2 points to take the points with Loyola of Chicago. 725, 726 on the betting board, it is Duquesne, and they're going to be taking on Dayton. There's no numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. Semi-total 133.5, and Dayton has a 7.5 point favorite. So 7 or less, willing to lay with Dayton. 8 or more taking the points with Duquesne. 133 or less, looking at the over 134 or higher to the under, as this is a Dayton squad that has been one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. Top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they're also one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, going against a Duquesne unit that it's very clear what they're looking to do. They're making this eyesore games. They're making things slow, grimy. That is the way that they are looking to operate, as Duquesne right now only has 2 guys that give you north of 7.5 points per contest. Sadie Grant, Jimmy Clark. These 2 guys combined for about 32 points per contest. They've been able to supply 6 assists per game, and both shooting the mid-30s from three-point range. About 33% out of both of those guys, but for Duquesne, they've really been able to step up on the defensive side of things, now in the top 90 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they don't have a ton down low. You've got Fusani Drame, who's able to give you about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game. They're going to be paired up with Nate Santos, coupled with Dayron Holmes. Holmes is able to give you 19 plus points, 8 boards, about a block and a half per contest while shooting darn near 40% from 3, and it's going to be very imperative that Duquesne guards the 3-point arc, which they've done well. They allow opponents to shoot 32.1% from distance. Dayton is a top 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, and they guard the arc well as well. Dayton away from home, allowing teams to shoot just 31% from 3-point range. That's a top 30 mark in all of college basketball, so that's going to hurt a Duquesne team that they just don't necessarily have a ton of size, but I do think that Duquesne going to do a relatively solid job of holding in there with the whole is greater than some of its parts approach. It's a Dayton team that has done a nice job of just being able to retain the ball in general, make the most out of their possessions. They're turning the ball over less than 10 times per contest, as they've been dealing with the injury to Javon Bennett. That is something that you do want to note. He's been out the last few games, averaging about 3.5 assists per contest. So Kobe Elvis along with Kobe Brea, they really have to take over the mantle in the backcourt. 20.5 points, 3.5 assists out of Elvis, and Brea is currently shooting 50% from 3. I think that that's going to be down ticking a little bit. I do think that Duquesne going to do a solid job of being able to guard from the outside. I do think that Holmes and Santos doing what they're doing down low, that is going to be the elixir for Dayton, and that's going to cause Duquesne to not be able to hold in this one. But that said, 7 or less, 1 to lay with Dayton, 8 or more taking those points with Duquesne, as I do think that things are going to be very slow, and they're going to be rather efficient, but not quite to Dayton's standards typically in these sort of games. So 133 or less, looking at the over 134 or higher, going to be diving in on the under. 727, 728 on the betting board, it is Florida State, and they're going to be taking on North Carolina. North Carolina opens up a 10.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is anywhere between 153.5 and 154.5. I said North Carolina is a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take north of 10 here with Florida State. A little bit of impact here is that typically you get this tournament out there in Greensboro, North Carolina, with this now being out there in our nation's capital. I do think that that affects things just a little bit, and North Carolina, they are by far the better rebounding team in this one. Florida State, they're outside the top 200 in terms of their rebound rate. What Florida State is going to need to do, they're going to need to generate turnovers. They're a top 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they've got a guy in Jameer Watkins that is a very nice Swiss Army knife guy. Gives you nearly 3 assists, 6 rebounds, 15 points per contest while shooting 35% from 3-point range, and that's massive because the only other player on the roster that scores north of 2 points per contest that is shooting above 30% from 3-point range is Aaron Green. He shoots 39% from distance, 12 points per game. Past that, you've got a bunch of guys I like to call chuckers, like Primo Spears. Gives you 10.5 points. Shoots 27% from 3-point range. You just have not been able to get a lot out of Jalen Worley on the offensive side of things. Pretty good plus defender on that side of things. And I mean, it is interesting to take a look at this Florida State defense because they've had their struggles all season long, especially guarding the 3-point arc. For Florida State, 288th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but going into yesterday, allowing opponents to shoot 32.1% from distance away from home compared to 38% at home. It's a wackadoo crazy split, but I mean, they've done a relatively solid job of locking things down when away from home. Now, they do have to go up against a North Carolina team that is very balanced in the top 40 nationally in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. It is a North Carolina team that they have really good splits as well with their defense. They only give up about 2.5 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home, and RJ Davis is going to be by far the best scorer in this game. He's been able to supply this North Carolina team with about 21.5 points per contest. And then Harrison Ingram, Armando Bacot, these are two guys that have been able to give you a combined about 19.5 rebounds per game. So I have to love the way that they've been able to fire on all cylinders. But this is a North Carolina team that they could be a little bit touch and go in terms of their outside shooting. North Carolina overall 76th in the country in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. And another team with crazy splits. They shoot it better from three-point range away from them rather than at home. But I mean, it becomes, can these guys like Cormac Ryan, Elliot Cadu, can these guys be able to continue to be able to step up, because it is a little bit of a top-heavy North Carolina team, and for as crazy as Florida State has been playing, as this team has been giving up points upon points. They have now given up at least 74 points in each of their last 6 games, but in all but one of these games, they've been able to get to 73 themselves. Can they maximize on that against a North Carolina team that they do come in, having given up at least 70 points in 3 of their last 4 games? Offense is really humming, at least 75 points scored in each of their last 4. I do think that this is going to be a bit more of an up and down game. I do think that Florida State is going to be able to get this game a little bit more scrambled. I think that North Carolina gets a job done, and certainly I do think that North Carolina wins the battle on the glass, but I can only make this line 9.5. Here at 10 plus, I'm willing to take the double figures with Florida State. I like their recent form, and with regards to this total, I think that Florida State does just enough to be able to keep this snug enough for late game felling. I do like this total over, set my total 155.5. Now we have my DK Network right to pick 729, 730 on the betting board. Pittsburgh and Wake Forest do battle from Capital One Arena. Wake Forest is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Total on this game is 147, and right up here is going to be on Pittsburgh. I feel like the wrong team is favored. I set them as a 2.5-point favorite. Now, I'm going to try, if at all possible, to write up the money line. You might notice that there might not be money lines available. It all depends upon the availability there. So if you see like plus 1.5, plus 2, something like that, that should be because money lines weren't available. But regardless, I am going to be on Pittsburgh in this spot. Now, the last time these two teams played, Pittsburgh got completely lambasted. They lost that game 91-58. That was a massive outlier, though. Wake Forest shoots 60.8% from the floor, 10 of 20 from three-point range, and that was on Wake Forest home floor. And that is very important, because this Wake Forest team is not the same team when they're away from home. They're 40th in the country entering into this tournament in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but averaging 17.2 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And some of the most stark shooting splits they're going to find in all of college basketball. They shoot 41.8% from three-point range at home, 14th in all of college basketball, 32.8% away from home, 204th nationally, going against a Pittsburgh team that entered Wednesday 27th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They do allow opponents to shoot more like 33.2% away from home, and both of these teams have similar splits with regards to their defense. Both teams give up about 10 to 10.5 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than at home, but this bodes in the way of Pittsburgh, 70th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The Demon Deacons more around 88th, and Pittsburgh does not allow you to get offensive rebounds. Wake Forest outside the top 120 with regards to rebound rate. Really, you only have 2 guys in Austin Carr along with Efton Reed. They're able to hit the glass. These 2 guys have been able to combine for about 14 rebounds per game, but outside that, you just haven't been able to get a lot of production there. Meanwhile, this Pittsburgh team, you don't necessarily have that one guy that's going to go out there and get you a double-double or anything like that. You do have one very dominant scorer, Blake Hinson, who I think is going to be the best scorer in this game. He's been able to supply this Pittsburgh team with darn near 20 points per contest from three-point range. He has just been absolutely incredible on that front, as well as he at 6'7", shoots 42.5% from three-point range. But I mean, you've got so many guys that they just do a good job of being able to hit the boards. Out of their top 7 scorers, 6 of them give you at least 3.9 rebounds per game. Zach Austin is able to give you a block and a half per contest. Frederico, so nice they named him twice, 5.3 rebounds, block and a half per contest. It's a Pittsburgh team that also does a nice job taking care of the ball. Carlton Carrington is just a freshman, hasn't played like that. His first game in college basketball had a triple-double, 13.5 points, 5 boards, 4 assists for a Pittsburgh team that's in the top 30 nationally in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And under the radar, you've gotten good production as well out of Jalen Lowe, who's been able to give you 9.5 points, 3.2 assists. He's really been able to emerge recently. He's been able to give this team now double figures in all but one of their games since the beginning of the month of February. He's a true freshman that has been able to do a nice job there. Ishmael Leggett is able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, and Wake Forest is having to play a back-to-back with not a lot of depth. They've only got one guy currently coming off the bench with Damari Monsanto not playing in the game yesterday. That's averaging north of 2 points per contest, and I do like him. And Mr. Parker Fredrickson, he's been able to give you 5.5 points, shoots 40% from three-point range. And Kevin Boopy Miller, he's a good guard, 3.5 assists, shoots 36.5% from 3, 15.5 points per contest for Wake Forest team. That, and if you look at their 10.8 turnovers per game, that's not bad, but Pittsburgh does a little bit better job of taking care of the ball. Hunter Salas, love his game, 18.5 points per contest, but with Wake Forest pretty much having a 6.5 man rotation, having to play in a back-to-back against a Pittsburgh team has been one of the more dominant defenses, especially at being a block down from 3-point range. I think it's going to be too much for a Wake Forest team that has those demonstrative home and road splits. As a result, made my total 145.5. I'm looking under. My DK Network right to pick. That's going to be on Pittsburgh, if at all possible. Going to be right up the money line. If not, it's just going to be taking that 1.5 to 2. 731, 732 on the betting board. You've got yourself NC State and Duke doing battle. Right now, NC State is an 11.5 point underdog, seeing some 10.5s out there as well. Totals anywhere between 149.5 and 151, and I'm going to be willing to nibble on the under. I did set my total at a 147.5, and with Duke, I could only make them a favorite of 9.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with NC State. Both of these teams have been two of the best in all of college basketball at being able to take care of the ball. Both of these teams are top 35 in all of college basketball in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and quite frankly, for this bunch at NC State, they've needed to, because their three-point shooting has really come and gone. You've got someone in Mr. DJ Horn who's able to turn it up. He's been incredible, shooting north of 40% from three-point range, top scorer, 16.5 points per contest, but where this NC State team is going to get massacred is on the glass. They've got one guy, Mohamed Diarra, who's able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. Nobody else on the roster is really able to do a good job of giving you north of 5.5 boards per contest, going up against a Duke team that has Kyle Filipowski, and when he's not tripping people, he's able to do a very solid job. 16 points, 8 boards, 3 assists per contest, overcame the court storm of 2024, and he and the rest of his team shooting 38% from three-point range. Duke has been actually playing quite a bit more slowly ever since John Shire took over the program. They're outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, but in terms of their points scored on a per possession basis, a top 25 team in all of college basketball, 27th in the country in terms of rebound rate, as you've been able to get good production out of Mark Mitchell, who's been able to give you about 6 boards, 12 points per contest, and then the duo of Jeremy Roach along with Jared McCain. Very under the radar in terms of backcourt duos. I mean, you've got a Duke team that only turns the ball over 9.7 times per contest. These two guys combine for 28 points per game. Roach gives you 3 assists, shoots 44% from 3. McCain shoots 40% from distance, and this has been an NC State unit that has been a little bit lacking with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage defense. NC State allow opponents to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range at the very least. Entering into yesterday, they were 293rd in all of college basketball, but I do think that with this Duke team playing quite a bit more slowly, with NC State being a bit of a more mid-tempo team this season as compared to last season, I do think that they're going to do an okay job of being able to hold in there. I do think that this game is going to be bogged down just a little bit in terms of the tempo. And if you take a look at this Duke unit in terms of games not played against North Carolina has been able to take them, and they've been able to take them really good. So in games outside that, since the beginning of the month of February, they've allowed north of 70 points to one team not named North Carolina. So circumstance where I'm going to be willing to take a look at the under. I do think that NC State is going to be looking to slow things down, especially with this being in a back-to-back spot. So looking at the under, and I'm willing to take anything north of 10 here with NC State. 733, 734 on the betting board. It is Virginia. They're going to be playing against Boston College. No numbers up on this game as Boston College won the late game in the ACC tournament, but that said, I do have Boston College as a 3-point underdog, so 2.5 or less willing to lay it with Virginia, 3.5 or more, taking a look at the points with Boston College, and then 126.5 or less, looking at the over, 127.5 or higher, going to be going in on the under for Boston College. Last time they played against Virginia, that was actually just a few weeks ago on the 28th of February. Virginia got the job done 72-68 on the road, and that was a game where Boston College only shot 5 of 22 from 3. I do think that they're going to be able to shoot much better in this ordeal, especially when you factor in the fact that Virginia just has not been the same defense when they've been away from home rather than when they've been at home. This Virginia team still one of the best in all of college basketball, being able to generate turnovers, and they're number 8 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're giving up 25 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home. It's a Virginia team that at home, teams cannot hit a 3 to save their lives at 27.7%, 34.3% in a road or neutral court environment, and Boston College, they do leave themselves open to giving up quite a few threes. They allow at home opponents to shoot 37.4% from distance. That actually goes down to 33% away from home, and Quinn Post, I think, is going to be a hard guard for a Virginia team that just doesn't have a lot down low. Virginia outside the top 230 in terms of their rebound rate. You've got one guy on the roster that's able to give you north of 4 rebounds per game. Ryan Dunn has been able to get her done. He's been rock solid. He had 13 rebounds last time these two teams played. He's averaging about 8 points, 7 boards, throws in there about 2.5 blocks, 1.3 steals per contest. I mean, he's been great, but Quinn Post is a 7-footer that gives you 17 points, 7 boards, shoots north of 40% from 3-point range, and Boston College, very good at taking care of the ball in terms of turnovers per possession, top 50 team in the country. Last time these two teams played, they only turned it over 4 times, with Jaden Zachary, Wacky Zachy, giving you 11.5 points, 4.3 assists per contest, and then been able to get some nice outside shooting out of Mason Madsen as well, shooting about 40% from three. Meanwhile, for Virginia, they do a nice job valuing the ball. They're a top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Reese Beekman has done a nice job of being that engine that runs the entire thing. 6 assists, 14.5 points. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from three at 32.5%, but gets good, clean offense going. Guys like Jordan Minor, Jacob Groves, they've really been able to come up clutch here recently. And for Jordan Minor, he had a really nice run towards like the back half of February where he was able to put up some really nice numbers, had that double-double against North Carolina. But it's been really touch and go for guys like him. So it's a very interesting circumstance. I do think the Boston College is going to be able to get some relatively solid offense going, and I can see this game coming down to late game fouling as Boston College ball outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So at a 126.5 or less, looking over 127.5 or higher, the under end with Virginia, 1 to lay up to 2.5 with them, 3.5 or more, taking those points with Boston College. 735, 736 on the betting board. This is a Big Ten Conference tournament out there in Minnesota. It's Michigan State and Minnesota doing battle. The state with the smallest drinks in the union. Minnesota is a 7-point underdog. Your total on this game, going to be getting it anywhere between 135 and 135.5. And when it comes to Minnesota, I did set them as an underdog of 8 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the 7 with Michigan State. I have to figure that Minnesota is going to get a little bit of a boost with them playing in their home state, but this is going to be nothing like they will get when being out there at the barn. If they were at the barn, I'd certainly be willing to take this summer, as last time these two teams played, when Minnesota played host, they were able to get the job done by kind of 59 to 56, and this is a Minnesota team with the best cover rate in all of college basketball, but they come in having failed to cover each other last 3, and I do think that Michigan State is going to be able to do a solid job of being able to run some efficient offense. They only turn the ball over 9.5 times per contest. They shoot 36% from 3, and both of these teams have very demonstrative home and road splits, and typically Michigan States are the biggest of them, as they give up north of 15 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But for Minnesota, it's even worse with them. They are giving up right around about 25 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home. I like the game of Dawson Garcia. He's able to give you 16 plus points, 7 plus boards, and this Michigan State team just has not been able to get a lot out of Matty Sissoko, who's been really a designated rebounder for the team. 5 boards, only 3.5 points per contest. I think that they're better served when Xavier Booker is out there on the floor, who's only been able to give you about 4 points per contest. He's just sort of been in and out of the fold for the team, but you know that Ty Walker is going to put on a show. 18.5 points, shoots 37% from 3-point range. They go up against a Minnesota team that has been able to get really good point guard play out of Elijah Hawkins, who led all of college basketball in terms of turnovers per game last season. He has cut those down to 2.8 per contest, gives you 7.5 assists per game, and he's able to get the ball into the hands of Mike Mitchell, Cam Christie, who combined to shoot 39.5% from 3, 22 points between the two of them, but Minnesota does turn the ball over about 12 times per contest. I do think that corrections are going to be made from the last time these two teams played, when Minnesota lost that game where they legitimately, both teams, neither of them were able to take north of 50 field goal attempts. In that one, it was a slow bleeder of a game. Michigan State lost the battle on the glass. I think that they're going to be able to do a little bit of a better job on guys like Pharrell Payne and company, and I do think that we're going to see more than 50 field goal attempts from both teams in this one. I did set my total at a 136. I think that there's going to be some late game fouling and some good shot making from both of these teams, as both really do give it up on the road from 3-point range. Minnesota, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, is allowing opponents to shoot 38.5% from 3-point range away from them. Meanwhile, for Michigan State, more like 37.5%. So you're at the 135, 135.5 looking at the over. Have the Michigan State willing to lay up to 7.5 with them, 737, 738 on the betting board. It is Wisconsin, and they are going to be playing against Maryland. Maryland is a underdog of 3.5 to 4 points. Your total on this game, it is 132.5. I'm willing to lay 3.5 and not a half a point more with Wisconsin. Did set them as a 3.5 point favorite. Last time these two teams squared off, it was a few weeks ago out there in Wisconsin. That was a game where Wisconsin gave up 70 to Maryland, and that's really an indictment on your defense, in my opinion. But this Big Ten tournament just has an innate ability to really bring out the griminess and just the slow slog nature of college basketball. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the under. This Maryland team has been absolutely incredible with the way that they, for one, run you off the 3-point line in terms of percentage of shots that they face from 3-point range, bottom 50 mark in all of college basketball. And for Maryland, opponents are shooting 27.2% from 3-point range against them away from home. That is third in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a Wisconsin team that they can't guard the arc to save their lives. 348th in all of college basketball. But now you go up against a team in Maryland Maryland, that is in the bottom 15 in all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage, but I do think that Jameer Young is going to be able to keep this team rather lively. He's been incredible all season long, 20.5 points, north of 4 assists, 5 rebounds per contest, and then Dante Scott chips in there about 11.5 points. He's able to give you 4.5 rebounds per game, but both of these guys shoot about 32.5 to 33% from three-point range, and really past them outside of anyone else that scores fewer than 5 points per contest. Somebody else shoots above 18% from three-point range out of their top 5 scorers. It's just really bad to say the least. And for this Maryland bunch, they might have a little bit of a tough time against a Wisconsin team that is top 50 in off-college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Stephen Krull, Tyler Wall, they combine for about 13.5 rebounds per game. And AJ Storr, though his three-point shooting percentage has fallen way off to about 31.5%, does give you 16 points, throws in there. Not a lot outside that, though, only about 3.5 or so rebounds per contest. No real facilitation for a Wisconsin team that has been pretty efficient with their offense, but it does take quite a bit of a nosedive when they're on the road as well. With Wisconsin, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 50th in all of college basketball, but they average 12.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are away from home rather than when they are at home. So I do think that this game is going to be a little bit of a slow bleeder and a slog, but with Maryland also scoring 13 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, I do think that Wisconsin has just enough to be able to get it done. I think that Krull and Wall clean up the glass just enough for Wisconsin to be able to get it done. So did set my line at 4. I'm willing to lay up the 3.5 with Wisconsin, and did set my total 130. Also looking at the under. 739, 740 on the betting board. Iowa and Ohio State do battle out there in the Big Ten tournament, and with Iowa, they are a 2 to 1.5 point underdog with your total 154.5 to 155. I like Ohio State here. I set them as a 2.5 point favorite, so going to be willing to lay that number with Ohio State. They've just really been able to pick up steam ever since we saw the move to Mr. Diebler as their coach. They've been, ever since Diebler has taken over, I believe won all but one of their games, and that one loss was the game that they played against Minnesota. And this is an Ohio State team that's been able to do a really good job with Bruce Thornton, giving you 16 points, 4.5 assists per game. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, but Jameson Battle has really proven his worth, in my opinion, ever since Diebler has taken over, shooting north of 40% from three-point range. He's been able to supply the team with 19-plus points in 3 out of the last 5 games, gave the team a pair of blocks in the last game against Rutgers as well, and it's an Ohio State team that is starting to play a little bit better on defense. They, prior to Diebler taking over, were well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's still bad, but certainly they're going to play a bit of better defense than this Iowa team. Iowa is well outside the top 225 themselves in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Iowa, this is just not the same jump shooting team that they have been in past years. Now, what I will say about Iowa is that they do a nice job not turning it over. Only about 9.5 turnovers per game, while they do generate 7 steals per game. It's not amazing, but it's within the top 225 nationally in terms of steals force on a per possession basis. You do have guys like Peyton Sanford, Tony Perkins, Ben Krikke. They combine as a trio to be able to give you about 44.5 points per contest. All 3 guys give you at least 4.5 rebounds per game, and as a matter of fact, throwing their Owen Freeman, each of your top 4 scorers do give you north of 4.2 rebounds per game. That is something that the team is going to need to capitalize on. Iowa, in terms of rebound rate, still not necessarily amazing, but during 24th, you take a look at those numbers, and I feel like they're a little bit better with those 4 guys in the glass, but that's where Ohio State is going to be able to take hold with Felix Opara, being able to give you about 2.5 blocks per contest. He throws in there 6+ rebounds per game. Ohio State, with regards to their rebound rate, more around 88th in all of college basketball, and you do have a pair of teams that, they're relatively much more based around their offense rather than their defense, but you've got one that's playing relatively slowly in Ohio State. You've got an Iowa team that's looking to push the tempo a little bit more, but I've noticed that Ohio State has been a little bit of a chameleon ever since Diebler has taken over. If the team looks to play fast, they're going to be willing to play fast. If they're looking to play slow, they're going to be willing to play slow, and with Ohio State, I do think that this team is just giving you a little bit of a better effort in general. I feel like they've got the better athletes on the floor, so did set Ohio State as a 2.5 point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the deuce with them, and I did set my total at a 154.5. I do think that this neutral court 5 is going to bog down the scoring just a little bit in this spot, and Iowa legitimately just is not the same scoring team in terms of jump shooting that they have been in past years. So looking at the under, set my total at a 154.5, so on the 155 looking under, and we'll lay up to 2 with Ohio State. 741, 742 on the card. It is Indiana and Penn State doing battle from Minneapolis. No numbers currently up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I did set Indiana as a 2-point favorite with a total of 150. 1.5 or less. Want to lay with Indiana 2.5 or more. Taking the points with Penn State, and then 149.5 or less. Looking at the over 150.5 or higher to the under. And obviously Penn State is a favorite. Would take Indiana on the money line, but The reason why I said Indiana's a favorite, despite the fact that they played against Penn State a few weeks ago and lost that game, I just think that Indiana is going to absolutely bludgeon Penn State on the glass. Penn State outside the top 300 in terms of their rebound rate. You've got Kudus Wahab, who's able to give you 7.5 boards, about 10 points per contest. But Penn State, you don't have a lot else. You do have a pair of guys in Ace Baldwin along with Nick Kern that did play at VCU together. They've been playing well off of one another, and Baldwin has really been that takeover guy. 6 assists, 2.5 steals, gives you 14.5 points on about 35% three-point shooting. And for Penn State, top 25 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And his team is amazing with their three-point shooting defense. 20th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, both home and road. Relatively solid on both of those splits. Meanwhile, Indiana, they're about 201st in the country with this regard, but I do think that Indiana is going to do a relatively solid job in this spot of being able to utilize their big men and just letting that be what dominates this game, as you've been able to have Khalil Ware show off his versatility all season long. He's been leading the way with 16 points, 9.5 boards. He's able to dole out a few assists, and for Khalil Ware, he's legitimately your top three-point shooter at 44.5% from distance. Indiana has completely abandoned the three-point shot. We've been noticing this recently, so even though you've got a good three-point shooting defense at Penn State, it doesn't mean as much because Xavier is looking to knife it down low. Malik Renew giving you 6 boards, 15.5 points per game. Mackenzie Mbakbo has been able to shoot it well from 3 at 34.5%, gives you 12 points per game, and with Xavier Johnson back in the fold, the offense, not saying it's been amazing, but it's been flowing a little bit more smoothly, as in the last 5 games that Xavier Johnson has been out there on the floor, the team has won all 5 of them. He's made an impact for this team, and it's not even due to scoring. He's scored single digits in 4 of those 5 games, but he gives you facilitation. He has given the team a combined 15 assists in the last 3 games. I think that is massive. You've got an Indiana team that, despite having all their bigs, they are outside the top 150 with regards to the rebound rate, but got a Penn State team that they just don't necessarily have a ton down low, and it's a Penn State team that I do think that they're starting to find their seed legs a little bit more on defense. They've given up fewer than 70 points each of their last 2 games. Meanwhile, you've got an Indiana team that has been a little bit all over the place, scoring 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games, but riding a 4-game win streak coming into the Big Ten tournament. I think that Indiana's bigs win out, and I do think that things turn a little bit harebrained and crazy like we've been seeing for Penn State recently. So 149 or less, looking at the over 150.5 or higher to the under end with Indiana, 1 to lay up to 1.5 with them, 2.5 or more, taking those points with Penn State. 743, 744 on the betting board. It is Xavier. They are playing against UConn, and UConn at MSG Madison Square Garden is a 15.5 to a 16-point favorite. Total on this game between 148.5 and 149.5. I set my line at 12.5, and I thought that was being aggressive. Like, this Xavier team is just not on the same level as UConn. There's no question about it, but this feels very extreme, especially when we saw yesterday a 24.5 point favorite very nearly go down. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. It is a Xavier unit that is going to lose the battle down low, but at the very least, Abdul Usman, he's able to provide some resistance. Comes in from North Texas, has done a nice job, 7 points, 6.5 boards. He's able to give you a block per contest. You've got a UConn team that is in the top 30 in terms of rebound rate and in the top 30 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got a trio of guys, Alex Caravan, Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer. They've been able to supply the team with a combined 44 points per contest. Newton and Spencer combined for 2.5 steals, 9 assists per contest, with Spencer shooting 45.5% from 3. And Alex Caravan, with everything that you've got with UConn, he gets lost in the sauce, and I don't understand why. He's 6'8", he pops it from 3 at a 40% clip, and then you've got Giant of the Earth Donovan Clingan. That gives you 2.5 blocks per contest, but for Xavier, they've been able to have a nice takeover score, and Quincy Oliveri be able to see him out with 19.5 points, shoots 43.5% for 3. It's a Xavier offense that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they are outside the top 50 nationally, but they've really been able to ascend recently. They've now been able to get to at least 76 points in 3 of their last 4 games, 72 plus points in each of their games here in the month of March, and I do think that for Xavier, they're going to be able to do an okay job on the glass with having Davion McKnight give you versatility, 10 points, 5 boards, 5 assists per contest. He's able to be a little bit of a do-it-all player now. Last time these two teams faced off in January, they got blown out, Xavier did, by about 43 points. So that was a little bit less than savory, but I do think that for UConn, you're very much paying a tax with this team. They've been tremendous with their defense, giving up 70 points or fewer pretty much all their games since the beginning of the month of February. So it is going to be a chore for Xavier to get points up on the board, but I do think that they find a way to be able to do so against a UConn team that is vulnerable in one respect. They do give up a couple too many threes in terms of UConn's opponent's three-point shooting percentage. They're checking in more in that neighborhood of about 52nd in all of college basketball, but that does ascend to about 35.6% from three-point range away from them, going against the Xavier team that they allow opponents to shoot 36.5% from distance. So Did set my total at a 150.5. That was pretty much the opener. Now that it's down to 148.5, 149. Looking at the over and taking a look at the points with Xavier. 745, 746 on the betting board. Seton Hall and St. John's to battle from MSG. St. John's is a 4-point favorite with your total 143. This is pretty much a home game for St. John's. They're not going to rule it as such, but I'm going to rule it as such, and I did set St. John's as a 4.5-point favorite. I'm willing to lay the 4. Now I'm willing to go half a point more. Seton Hall has been a little bit hot and cold in terms of their defense. They've been really good on the glass, top 45 team with regards to rebound rate, but away from them, they do allow opponents to shoot 37.5% from three-point range, and I've always noticed that teams playing like their first or second game in MSG, they have a little bit of a struggle. So St. John's does get a little bit of boost up because they are used to the shooting backdrop and the shooter's eye in this game a little bit more as well, though I did set my total at 142.5. You've got a St. John's team that they've just been so much better at home rather than on the road, and I'm using home splits for St. John's in this one. They give up 17 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside shoot court setting. They allow opponents to shoot 30.2% from three-point range at home compared to 38.5% away from home. That's not just the defense being better. That is the backdrop of MSG as well. That does play very much to their favor, and they go up against the Seton Hall team that has really struggled from three-point range. They shoot about 31.5 to 32% from three-point range as a collective. They might have the most versatile player out there in Kadari Richmond, 16 points, 6+ boards, 5 assists per game, though he does turn the ball over 3 times per contest, and he's helped out by Elmir Dazri Davis, chipping in there about 29 points per contest while shooting as a collective 36.5% from 3, but Seton Hall also turns the ball over about 12.5 times per contest, and for the St. John's team, they should be able to own the glass as well. You've got a pair of guys that have been able to combine for about 16.5 rebounds per game, and Chris Ludlam, Joel Soriano. Soriano has been able to give you 2 blocks per game, and has actually shot 44% from three-point range. Dennis Jenkins has done a nice job of being able to lock it down and not give away as many turnovers, so his three-point shooting numbers more around about 35.5%. They've been ascending as the season has went along around them. Isn't necessarily the world's greatest shooters, but being a team that's 29th in the country with regards to rebound rate, this team is able to generate second chances. You've had RJ Louise when he's been out there because he's been banged up all season long. Be a bit of a disappointment from three-point range, but now he's finding ways to be able to get buckets. He's been able to give the team 11 plus points for the last 5 games, and I do think that St. John's going to continue to ascend, be able to get the job done as they come in having won 5 straight games, getting to at least 80 points in every one of them, but the defense has been able to step up a little bit more as well, going up against AC and all bunch. They have now given up 64 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games. I do think that things get bogged down a little bit more with regards to the tempo, but St. John's is going to be able to find a way to be able to get the job done. So, going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 here with St. John's. Did set my total more around a 142.5, so going to be diving in on the under and willing to lay it with St. John's. 747, 748 on the betting board. Creighton and Providence who battle from MSG. Right now, Creighton is a favorite of 7.5 to 8 points. The last game is 141.5. Make Creighton the 9-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Providence. They just have been really dealing with a lot ever since Bryce Hopkins has been out of the fold, and I love the game of Devin Carter. Devin Carter, 18.5 points, 8.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 38.5% from three-point range. Who steps up around him, though? Josh Oduro, 16 points. He's able to shoot in the low 30s from three-point range, but I mean, these are the only 2 guys on the roster that can really give you double figures, and there's really only 2 other guys on the roster that give you north of 5 points per game, and that does not bode well when you're in a back-to-back spot. Fully recognize that it's not like Providence was playing the most up-tempo team in the world in Georgetown, but still, that takes quite a bit out of you. Now you have to go up against a Creighton team that they're a team that I fear on a back-to-back because they just don't have a lot of depth, but this is game number 1 for them. We've got Baylor Shireman, Ryan Kalkbrenner combining for 15 rebounds. They've been absolutely tremendous as these 2 guys along Trey Alexander all give you between 17 and 18.5 points per game. Kalkbrenner, your main low post presence with 3 blocks per contest. Alexander shoots 32% from 3, plays a little bit more on the ball with being able to give you about 5 assists per contest as Alexander, Shireman, Steve Ashworth, their main point guard, all give you at least 4 assists per game. They're the only team in all of college basketball that have 3 separate players that give you at least 4 assists per contest, and I do think that Creighton is going to be able to do a solid job on the glass with Kalkbrenner being able to lock things down. With Creighton in terms of their rebound rate, they're currently checking in more in that neighborhood, about 36th in all of college basketball, while Providence, they continue to be a top 50 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that they're going to be giving up a few second chances here. They're more around 150th in the country with regards to the rebound rate, and it just comes down to, is Creighton going to be missing some of the outside shots that they're going to be taking? Because this is a Creighton team that they do like to shoot it from three-point range quite a bit, but that said, you've got a Providence unit that just has not been the same at being able to guard the arc this season as they have been in the past, allowing opponents to shoot 34.2% from distance. That is 207th in all of college basketball. Creighton, a top 75 team at being able to lock down from three-point range. I do think that with Providence having not a lot of depth. Not necessarily having that size down low. It allows Creighton to be able to get the job done and be able to find a way to get to the next round. I did set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and did set my total at 141. Creighton well outside the top 200 with regards to total possessions per game, while Providence has been playing relatively solid defense and has been touch and go with their offense. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Creighton. 749, 750 on the betting board. It is Marquette and Villanova doing battle from MSG. We've got no numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I did set Marquette as a 4.5 point favorite and a total of 140.5. So 4 or less willing to lay with Marquette, 5 or more looking at Villanova, and then 140 or less looking at the over, 141 or higher the under. Fully expect a better effort here from Villanova after they very nearly lose outright to DePaul. I mean, they are lucky they did not lose that game, and I'm not even kidding, but I do think that Villanova is going to be able to keep the defense going. This Villanova bunch, since the beginning of the month of February, has allowed north of 70 points once, and that was to UConn. So the defense has been there. Heck, even yesterday, the defense was there for them. The offense has been the issue. You've got Eric Dixon, you've got Tyler Burton, who are able to combine for about 12.5 rebounds per game, and even though Villanova's not like beastly with regards to rebound rate, they go up against a Marquette team that's outside the top 200. With that regard, they're going to have an advantage there, and for this Villanova unit, they do the little things well. They turn the ball over less than 10 times per contest. They're a top 5 team in the country in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. They're just not necessarily a flashy team from three-point range. Eric Dixon, TJ Bamba, they combine to shoot about 37% from three-point range. You haven't been able to get anything from the outside from Mark Armstrong, who gives you 8 points, 2.5 assists per game, and on the Marquette side of things, it sounds as though Tyler Kolek is going to be out of the fold for this one. Might be able to return a little bit later, but he's going to be held out. But I really liked what I saw from Marquette in their season finale against Xavier. You saw Cam Jones really become a man in that one. 16.5 points. He was able to dole out 9 assists. He's not quite Tyler Kolek in the way that he doles it out, but I mean, he's able to do a nice job there. And then also Ogudero. 7 boards, 1.3 blocks per contest. He's been very good down low. You need a little bit more around him. He's the only guy in the roster that is going to be eligible in this game. That's going to give you north of 4 boards per contest with Kolek being out of the fold. But that said, you've been able to get some good production on something like a Chase Ross, who's been able to shoot 36% from three-point range. And this is a Villanova unit that is much better at being able to guard the three-point line rather than a season ago where they were one of the worst teams in all of college basketball with that respect. But it is still a Villanova team that they'll give up a few threes from time to time. They allow opponents to shoot 32.5% from three. That actually goes down to 31.7% from distance when they're away from home. And this Marquette team, even with Kolek out of the fold, they're a top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that they're going to cause a little bit of discomfort on this Villanova offense that we saw struggle with DePaul yesterday. And for Marquette, they themselves do allow opponents to shoot about 36% from three-point range, but it's a Villanova unit that's had a little bit of struggle there. So 140 or less looking over, 141 or higher to the under with Marquette. Factoring in the fact that Tyler Kolek is going to be out of the fold, we'll lay up to 4 with them, 5 or more, taking those points with Villanova. 751, 752 on the betting board. It is BYU, and they're taking on Texas Tech out there in Kansas City, Missouri. This is for the Big 12 tournament, and right now BYU is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite, and your total on this game between 153 and 154. And with BYU, I did set them as a favorite of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with BYU. They looked really good in that game yesterday against Central Florida, got us back online with the DK Network write-up, so yay verily there. And this team just checks really all the boxes. They're a top 40 team in terms of rebound rate. They're a top 55 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, they take a little bit of a fall off with their defense away from home, giving up about 11.5 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But you've got a Texas Tech unit that they have a fall off of north of 15 points per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And this is a Texas Tech unit that they're not necessarily great at being able to guard the three-point arc away from home. At home, 29%, very good. Away from home, 37%. They go up against a BYU team that takes north of 50% of their field goal attempts from three-point range. Away from home, they've only been able to shoot about 32 to 33% from distance, but I do think that they're going to be able to carve up this unit as for BYU. You've got something that I like for teams that are able to make deep runs in these sorts of tournaments. Depth. You've got 7 different guys that give you at least 9 points per contest. Dallin Hall gives you 5 assists, shoots 36.5% from 3. Jackson Robinson, 14 points. Spencer Johnson, 3.5 assists, 10.5 points, about 5.9 rebounds per game. And you take a look at this BYU bunch out of their top 6 scorers, you've got 4 of them giving you north of 4 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Texas Tech, they've been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. Darion Williams, I think, is one of the more low-key, just underrated players in this conference. Shoots 47% from 3, 11.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and it is a BYU team that they'll give it up from 3-point range away from home as well. They're at home, allowing opponents to shoot just 28.5% from 3. That falls off to 34% in a road/court environment. And Pops Isaacs, he's been able to do a nice job supplying the team with 16 points per contest. Got a 7-footer in Warren Washington that does a relatively solid job on the glass. As a result, you've got a Texas Tech unit that, in terms of the rebound rate, they're able to be relatively respectable, but still just 141st in all of college basketball, while BYU is a top 20 team with that regard. I do think that that's going to be a little bit difficult, even with Texas Tech being able to get some good three-point shooting out of some of these ancillary pieces, like Kerwin Walton, who was able to give you 8.5 points, shoots 47% from 3-point. Joe Toussaint has been able to do a nice job of being able to hold it out as well, but all in all, I do think that BYU finds a way to be able to get it done. I'm willing to lay up to a deuce with them, and with regards to the total, I set mine at a 150.5, so I do think that you're going to get a higher scoring game, but once again, early game, it's a little bit of a back-to-back. Neither of these teams are super up-tempo, so looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with BYU. 753, 754 on the betting board. Houston and TCU do battle from Kansas City, Missouri. Houston is a 10 to a 10.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 137.5, and when it comes to Houston, could only set them as a 7-point favorite. I'm willing to take the points with TCU. TCU has already knocked off Houston once this year. I don't think that they're going to be able to do it a second time, but they match up relatively well on TCU, a top 40 team in terms of rebound rate in all of college basketball, with good versatility out of Emmanuel Miller. 16 points, 6 boards. He's able to shoot about 39.5% from 3-point range for a TCU team that overall, entering into yesterday, shooting 36.5% from the outside. Now they go up against a Houston team that's number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This Houston unit has done a great job getting off the 3-point arc as well, allowing opponents to shoot just 30.2% from 3-point range overall. That does ascend, though, to 33.3% away from home. And for Houston, they are giving up well north of 20 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. I will say this, though, as well about Houston. They've got the best point guard in this game and one of the best in all of college basketball. That'd be Jamal Shed. Gives you north of 6 assists to fewer than 2.2 turnovers per contest. He's been able to supply the team with 13 points per game, and his scoring has really come along for the ride. For Shed, he's now been able to give the team at least 12 points in all but one out of the team's last 8 games. That helps out LJ Cryer, who's been able to give you about 15.5 points per game. And for Houston, they've been playing at a very, very slow, methodical pace. Outside the top 310 in terms of total possessions per game, though, Emmanuel Sharp, he's been able to also give you about 12.5 points per contest. I do, though, think that TCU is going to be able to find a way to knock down a few threes in this one. Jameer Nelson Jr., Micah Peavy, they've been able to both give you about 11.5 points per contest for TCU. I do think that the turnovers are going to be the bane of them, because you've got a Houston team that's in the top 20 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. In terms of actual turnovers committed, they're a top 50 team with that regard, but I do think that this is going to be a relatively slow slog of a game that's going to allow TCU to hold in. They're set by a total at a 134. I'm diving in on the under with Houston. Made them a 7-point favorite. Won't take double figures here with TCU and the under. 755, 756 on the betting board. Iowa State and Kansas State do battle out there in Kansas City, Missouri. No numbers up on this game, but I did make Iowa State a 8.5 point favorite, and my total 132.5. So 132 or less, look it over. 133 or higher to the under, and with Iowa State, want to lay up to 8 with them, 9 or more. Taking those points with Kansas State. These two teams hooked up to end the regular season, and Kansas State was able to get a win on their home floor, but this Kansas State team just has not been able to protect the ball to save their lives this season. Outside the top 3 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis, gotta love their trio, and Tyler Perry, Arthur Kaluma, Cam Carter, they've been able to combine for 45 points per contest. With this Kansas State team, they've also been a very good team on the glass. Iowa State, they do a relatively solid job of being able to find a way to just be able to manufacture rebounds sort of on the fly, but I do think that that is going to be able to keep Kansas State relatively lively. David and Gesson being able to give you 7 rebounds per game, that has been very critical for this bunch. Kansas State, 84th in the country in terms of rebound rate, though. This is an Iowa State team that, even though they are a team that they really pride themselves on generating a bunch of steals, they are a team that really sells out on that respect, and they have been able to give you a rebound rate that's about 125th in all of college basketball, while having those two guys, Damon Lipsby, Keshawn Gilbert, supply 26 points, about 9 assists. You've got Lipsby shooting 37% from 3, and it's an Iowa State team that, we always talk about the defense, they're also a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Kansas State well outside the top 175 with this regard, with Kansas State just turning the ball over the way that they do. I do think that you're going to see a revenge here from Iowa State when these two teams played a few days ago. It was a case where Kansas State turned the ball over 15 times per contest, but Iowa State turned it over 14 themselves. Kansas State was able to dominate on the glass. I think that things iron out a little bit more, and Iowa State is going to be able to bounce back from shooting 5 of 17 from 3-point range. that first time around, Kansas State overall in terms of their opponent's three-point shooting percentage, it actually is a little bit lower away from home rather than at home, 31.8%. At home, 30.8% in a road/neutral environment. And Kansas State, legitimately a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I do think that Kansas State is going to be able to do a rock-solid job on defense. Problem is, I do think that the offense is going to let them down once again, which is why I've got my total at 132.5, 132 or less, looking over 133 or higher the under end, with Iowa State willing to lay up to 8 with them, 9 or more, taking those points with Kansas State. 757, 758 on the betting board. Baylor and Cincinnati do battle. Yes, we are on to Cincinnati, and we are not on to having numbers on this game, but that said, I've got my handicap. Made Baylor a 5-point favorite with a total of 143, with Baylor 4.5 or less willing to lay with them, 5.5 or more taking those points with Cincinnati, and then 143 or less looking at the over, 143.5 or higher to the under end with Cincinnati. It's been a very good run for them in the Big 12 tournament. They take out a Kansas team that just could not, frankly, shoot from three-point range yesterday, but this Cincinnati team, they're built around defense. They're outside the top 120 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They don't have a ton in their backcourt, but they've got a lot down low. Victor Lakeen has been able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. You've been able to have someone in Aziz Bandango come over from Utah Valley. He's supplying the team with 7.5 boards, giving you north of a block and a half per contest for Cincinnati team that they shoot about 32.5% from three-point range. Dan Skillings has really been your top scorer of 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, but the key for Cincinnati, are they going to be able to guard the three-point line? Baylor has been a little bit hot and cold with their three-point shooting here in conference, and for Baylor, they have been a defense that has been hot and cold. They're giving up north of 14 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and when Baylor is away from home, they allow opponents to shoot 36.8% from three-point range, more like 30.3% when they're at home, but with Cincinnati, they've been allowing opponents to shoot about 37% from distance when they've been away from home. That's a little bit of an issue, but you have a Baylor team that's been just a little bit all over the place recently as well in terms of their offense. It's a Baylor team that they are coming off of scoring just 68 points at Texas Tech, and I do think that they're going to be able to bounce back a little bit more here. I like their backcourt with Jacoby Walter, Ray J. Dennis, combining for 28 points per contest. Dennis has been a good facilitator, 6.5 assists, shoots 36.5% from three, and for Baylor, they're shooting 39.8% from the outside. You take a look at their top 5 guys that have made at least 1 3 this year. That takes out Yves Messi, and only one guy in Walter shoots below 36.2% from the outside. Jane Nunn has been able to shoot 45% from 3. Langston Love, who's been a bit in and out of the fold, he shoots 48% from three-point range, but I have to wonder how much of Love you're going to get because he has been in and out of the fold, has been playing limited minutes recently, but Baylor is still a top 45 team in terms of rebound rate as well. Messi is the only guy that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. He and Jalen Bridges, as a matter of fact, combined for 11 boards per contest, but they've done a nice job locking down there. It is Baylor team that they do turn the ball over about 12 times per contest against a Cincinnati team that isn't amazing with regards to being able to generate turnovers, but it is a Cincinnati team that in regulation has been great with their defense. 72 points or fewer, given up in 5 of their last 6 games. Got a Baylor team that has been all over the place in terms of that defense as well, but I do think that for Cincinnati, they're going to do a nice job being able to stay active, being able to really bog this game down, and we did see that when these two teams played in January. That was a 62-59 win for Baylor on their home floor against Cincinnati on a night where these two teams combined to shoot 9 of 41 from three-point range. I think the things are going to be a little bit warmer here, but I do think that Cincinnati is going to be looking to push down the tempo a little bit more in this one. I do think that they find a way to be able to guard the three-point arc as well. So did set my total where a 142.5 or less. I'm looking at the over, 143.5 or higher, the under end with Baylor, willing to lay up to 4.5 with them, 5.5 or more, taking those points with Cincinnati. 759, 760 on the betting board. This is the American tournament out there in Fort Worth, Texas, as you've got Tulsa and East Carolina doing battle. East Carolina is a 2.5 point favorite with your total 140, and I said East Carolina is a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. East Carolina, overall for the season, a top 155 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but it would be even more impressive if Brandon Johnson did not get a little bit of an illness towards the beginning part of the season. They had a few rough defensive displays, but he was sort of in and out of the fold, and when he's been in there, they've been more of a top 125 defense, going against a Tulsa unit that just has not been the same when they've been away from home. This Tulsa team that generates 12 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. In terms of their three-point shooting defense, I mean, it is just completely night and day. Tulsa's given up more than 15 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. With Tulsa, they allow opponents to shoot 28.2% from three-point range at home, 38.2% when they're away from home, and they go up against an East Carolina team that, fortunately for them, not necessarily amazing from three-point range, but you've got Johnson, who I was mentioning before, along with RJ Felton, making a really nice 1-2 punch. We combined 31.5 points, 14.5 boards. You've got Johnson shooting 35% for three, Felton shooting 36.5% for three, and then a 35.5% three-point shooter in Ezra Uzar, who's been able to do a nice job being able to supply the team with about 10.5 points per contest. Big drop off from there, but you do have Bobby Fetterford running some efficient offense. For East Carolina, they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per game. Meanwhile, Tulsa, they do get in trouble with the turnovers. About 13 turnovers per contest. They shoot about 32.5% for three, but they've got the best go-to scorer in this game. PJ Haggerty, 5.5 boards, 21 points per game. And it's going to come down to which of these teams is going to be able to do a little bit of a better job on the glass. And for Tulsa, other than Jared Garcia giving you 6 boards per contest, nobody outside of Haggerty on this roster, outside those two guys, giving north of 4.3 rebounds per game. For Tulsa, as a result, their rebound rate just 273rd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, East Carolina, not anything amazing, but 202nd, far better on that front. I do think that East Carolina going to do a nice job controlling the boards. East Carolina does a better job of taking care of the ball. And with both of these teams hot and cold from three-point range, I do think that East Carolina finds a way to be able to get the job done, set them as a 4-point favorite. So one to lay with the Pirates, and did set my total at 140. East Carolina has been very good at being able to get their tempo in a lot of these games, as Tulsa, they're a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. East Carolina outside the top 300. I do think that you get somewhere in the middle, so it did set my total 140, 140.5 or higher, looking at the under, and one to lay up to 3.5 here with East Carolina. 761, 762 on the betting board. Memphis is going to be playing against Wichita State. Wichita State, an 8 to an 8.5 point underdog. Total on this game between 153.5 and 154.5, and with Wichita State, I set them as a 7.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the A+. With Memphis, they are by far the more talented team. You've got so many guys out there that are able to contribute, and Davy Jones has been able to supply 21.5 points, 6.5 boards, fills out a few assists, shoots 40% from three. Javon Quinterly gives you 5 assists per game, but the problem for this Memphis team is the defense. They're well outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They give it up from three-point range as they allow opponents away from home to shoot 35% from three. Now, fortunately for them, Wichita State, a bottom 55 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage, but Kobe Rogers, the transfer from Siena, he does give you 16 plus points per contest, shoots darn near 40% for three. Nobody outside of him really shoots north of 33% for three, but Wichita State, a top 95 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and this Memphis bunch just has not gotten a lot out of some of the ancillary pieces. You've been able to have Jaquan Walton be able to give you about 8.5 points per contest, having a banged-up Caleb Mills has diminished the backcourt play a little bit as well. And for Wichita State, I think that they're going to bring the fight to Memphis. Memphis is well outside the top 100 with regards to rebound rate, despite having Nequan Tomlin be able to join the fold, being able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for this Wichita State team, you've got 3 separate guys, Sal Original, Kenny Poto, along Quincy Ballard, who are all able to give you at least 5.5 rebounds per game. They've been able to do a solid job on that front. It is a Wichita State team that sometimes gets a little bit out of sorts with the ball, but even Harnell Beverly has been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. I think that Wichita State is going to do a nice job holding in there, and this has been just a very interesting set of games that these two teams have played, because when Memphis played against Wichita State the first time around, they went like 60% from three-point range. They went out for north of 100 points, and then the last time these two teams played, it was a 65-63 slog where neither team could get anything going. I think that you get something in the middle, and I do think that this game is going to be close enough for some late game fouling, so it is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to take the points with Wichita State, set them as a 7.5 point underdog, and maybe my total 155.5, also looking at the 153.5 over, 763, 764 on the betting board. North Texas and Tulane are going to be doing battle. Tulane is an underdog of 5.5 points, so on this game is 141, and interesting circumstance here, I did set my total 142. I'm looking at the over. North Texas, they have been a bottom 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, and this is still a really good North Texas defense. North Texas, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're still clocking in 46 in all of college basketball, and they're actually giving up right around 4 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. North Texas, a top 10 team in the country in terms of points allowed per possession away from home, but North Texas has just been able to do a nice job of being able to set up good, clean offense. As North Texas, they've been able to ascend to about 144th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, granted, they are scoring about 17.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home, but I do think that they're going to be able to do a solid job in this ordeal against a bunch that has just been very suspect on the glass. And Tulane, they're outside the top 300 with regards to their rebound rate, and this is a Tulane team that if they're not able to generate turnovers, it's going to be a long day for them, because for Tulane, out of your top 5 scorers, 4 of them do give you at least 1.4 steals per contest. Kevin Cross, Zion James, they combine for about 3 steals, 31 points per contest. James shoots 36.5% from three. Cross shoots 44% from the outside, but this is also a Tulane team that they give it up from three-point range. They allow opponents away from home to shoot 37% from three-point range, while this North Texas team has got things on lockdown. The one thing that they do a better job of away from home rather than at home is defending the three. They allow opponents to shoot just 32% from the outside, and I do think that when it comes to this Tulane team, even though you've got the guys in the starting five that are rock solid, you don't have any depth around them. You've been able to have Trey Williams give you about 8.5 points per contest, but you got 5 double-figure scores, Trey Williams, and then absolutely nothing else. Meanwhile, you've got a North Texas unit that has been able to get right around about 19 points per contest. Jason Edwards shooting 36.5% from three, but each of your top three scorers shoot at least 36% from distance, and among players that have made at least 1 3, 4 of your top 5 shoot at least 36.3% from the outside. North Texas about 11.5 turnovers per game. Not great, not terrible considering their tempo, but Aaron Scott supplies you with about 6 rebounds per game. You've got Mule Sissoko, who gives you about 4.5 boards as a bit of a designated rebounder, and North Texas should certainly be able to win that battle on the glass and be able to generate some second chances with offensive rebounds. North Texas under 12th in the country in terms of rebound rate, so I do think that North Texas finds a way, gets the job done, and wins from within, and I do think that for Tulane, they're going to be able to find a few open shots themselves. Set my line at a 142 with regards to the total, with Tulane a top 25 team with regards to total possessions per game, so looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 with North Texas. Sub 65, sub 66 on the betting board. SMU and Temple do battle from Dickies Arena, and SMU is a 12-point favorite. Your total on this game going to be getting that at a 142, and I did set my total 138.5. I'm looking at the under. SMU is still a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but it's been very strange to look at this SMU team as they just have seen a massive fall off since the beginning of the month of February with their defense. As a matter of fact, last time this SMU team has given up fewer than 68 points in a game, you have to go all the way back to the month of January. They have been getting gashed quite a bit with that regard. Offense has been able to do a little bit of a better job as they've just cranked up their tempo, but you don't have a lot of outside shooting with this SMU team. Their top 5 scorers, one guy shoots above 25% from three. That'd be Chuck Harris, shooting 39.5% from three, gives you 13.5 points per contest. Now, as a whole, it is a SMU team that does shoot about 34% from the outside, so not bad there, and they're one of the better teams in all of college basketball, being able to generate turnovers, top 55 in the country with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But you got 2 guys on the roster that give you north of 9 points per game. The other one is Zariq Phelps, who gives you 15 points, 2.5 assists, 2 steals per game. But I mean, once again, he shoots about 22.5% from 3-point range, and you go up against a Temple team that, away from home, they allow opponents to shoot less than 31% from 3-point range. You've got Heisier Miller, who's been able to give you 4 assists, 15.5 points per game for a Temple team that just quite frankly has been inefficient with their offense. They're outside the top 240 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. It has been a team that honestly has been able to do a little bit better job on the road rather than at home with regards to their defense. Offense, a little bit of a different story there, but the Temple team, they are allowing about 3.2 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than when they are at home. They're going to get cooked on the glass. SMU is a top 65 team with regards to their rebound rate, as you've had Samuel Williamson be able to supply you with about 7.5 rebounds per game, but Jordan Riley gives you 6 boards per contest. Really, other than Micah Piccarelli, you don't have anyone on this roster for Temple that's really able to shoot it well from 3-point range. He's shooting about 36.5% from distance, but with Temple, you do have out of your top 5 scorers, 4 of them giving you at least 4 rebounds per game. I do think that that's going to keep this team semi-lively in this game. I did set my total as a result at a 138.5. Like the way that Temple has been able to guard away from home. Don't like the offense though, but I think that we've went a little bit too far here with this SMU line. I'm going to be looking at the points with Temple and this total under 767, 768 on the betting board. Mississippi State and LSU do battle from the SEC tournament out there in lovely Nashville, as LSU is an underdog of 5 points. So that's between 144.5 and 145.5, and I said Mississippi State as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Mississippi State. This has not been the defensive team that we've seen in past years, but this is a bunch that they're still one of the best rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. They're still a top 35 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, still number 63 in all of college basketball. That certainly outguns an LSU team that is about 182nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. LSU outside the top 150 with regards to their rebound rate as well, as LSU does not have a single guy in the roster that's able to give you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Mississippi State, Tolu Smith being able to give you about 14 points, 8 boards. That's big. And Mississippi State also has the best go-to scorer in Josh Hubbard, who's been able to supply 17 points, shoots about 36.5% from 3-point range. While on the flip side, Jordan Wright has been Mr. Right for LSU, supplying 15 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, shoots about 34% from 3-point range. They've been dealing with an injury to Jalen Cook, who's been out since Valentine's Day. He was really their number 1 scorer, and guy that was able to do a nice job being able to facilitate, but got a lot of holes greater than the sum of its parts pieces from there. You've been able to have Trey Hannibal give out the ball a little bit more. He's now up to about 3 assists per contest. Shoots it well from 3, but just really doesn't assert himself too much. It's an LSU unit that, to their credit, they've been able to get to at least 75 points in each of their last 3 games, but last time these two teams faced off, Mississippi State went on the road and completely punked LSU 87-67 the final in that one, as Mississippi State in that game shot 10 of 21 from 3. Lightning is not going to strike twice. Mississippi State, they're a better three-point shooting team than they were a season ago, but still, they're shooting as a collective about 32.5% from 3. They turned the ball for 13 times per contest. Mississippi State well outside the top 150 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but I do think that for LSU, they're going to have a tough time being able to find very open shots in this one. It's been an LSU team that in the backcourt just hasn't had a ton, and they don't have a ton of scoring coming off the bench as well. It's been very touch and go with that regard as well. So I do think that this is going to be bogged down from the last time these two teams played. It's a Mississippi State team has relatively mid-tempo. LSU is looking to push tempo, but I think the Mississippi State is able to really drown this game with their defense. So I did set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay with Mississippi State, and did set my total more around a 142. So also looking at the under. 769, 770 on the betting board. South Carolina and Arkansas do battle from Nashville, Tennessee. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap as I set South Carolina as a favorite of 7.5 points and set my total at a 141.5. So you're at a 141 or less, looking at the over 142 or higher. The under end, one to lay up to 7 with South Carolina, 8 or more taking the points with Arkansas. Yay, verily, for Arkansas being able to get that overtime win, but they had utilized a lot that was in the tank for that, and this Arkansas team just doesn't really do anything well. They don't have a single guy that has taken over and has become the main facilitator for the team. I like Draymond Mark, and I like K-Leaf Battle. Mark has been your top scorer with north of 16.5 points per contest, shoots 37% from 3. Battle, he shoots north of 35% from 3, 14.5 points per game, but other than that, it's a rudderless ship. You've got Trevon Brazile is able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. Only guy on the roster, by the way, that's giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game that I will say, off the bench, you've been able to get good production out of Mekhi Mitchell. Mekhi Mitchell has really stepped up his game. He's been able to give the team at least 5 rebounds, and now 5 out of the last 6 games. So even though Arkansas is well outside the top 125 with regards to rebound rate, they're playing better with that regard. But South Carolina, top 60 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, in terms of rebound rate. And you want to talk about guys that are ascending. Colin Murray Boyles, buy stock right now. This guy has been absolutely awesome down the stretch, giving the team at least 8 rebounds in each of the last 4 games. He has supplied the team with 8 blocks in the last 3 games, 6 steals in the last 2. He is a stat sheet stuffer, does really everything except for pop threes for a South Carolina team that does have that go-to scorer. Michi Johnson give you 14.5 points, shoots 32% from 3. Now, it is a South Carolina team that they're not going to light the world on fire and give you a whole bunch of offense, but they know who they are. They are outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game. They don't deviate from it with South Carolina in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're still about 80th in all of college basketball. They do see a fall off of about 6.5 points per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, but this team has just done a really nice job in terms of being consistent. As a matter of fact, they're also 80th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Arkansas, well outside the top 100 in both of those respects. South Carolina only turns the ball over about 10 times per contest, and for Arkansas, because they don't have a main point guard, it gets a little bit uglier there as well with about 12 turnovers per contest. So I do think that South Carolina going to be able to take hold of this game. I do think that they're going to be able to get there just very slow, controlled tempo, as it's a South Carolina team that they just really haven't been pushed out of sorts too much all season long. This is a bunch that they have now allowed 66 points or fewer in all but 2 of their games since the beginning of the month of February, and for that matter, they have given up fewer than 69 points in all but 2 of their last 12 games. So, circumstance where I set my total to where 141 or less, looking at the over 142 or higher to the under. With South Carolina, 1 to lay up to 7 with them, 8 or more taking the points with Arkansas. 771, 772 on the betting board. Ole Miss is going to be playing against Texas A&M. A&M is a 5 to a 5.5 point favorite. Your total on this game between 140.5 and 141, and with A&M, I did set them as a favorite of 5 points. At a 5.5, that is my buy point on Ole Miss. Ole Miss got completely waxed by this team a few days ago. We talked about that with Blake Lovell, but I don't think that Lightning is going to be striking twice for a Texas A&M team that is still a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of games played away from home with their 3-point shooting. They shot in that game 13 of 26 from 3. Certainly, I think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there, and as a result, I did set my total more around a 141. At a 140.5, that's a max I'm willing to take over, but I do think that things are going to be a little bit more tame with that respect. For Ole Miss, it's going to be very important for this bunch to just be able to play relatively even up on the glass. Texas A&M, a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of their offensive rebound rate. That's merely the percentage of misses that they have on offense that they're able to grab an offensive rebound on, as Ole Miss outside the top 150 with regards to rebound rate. This despite the fact that you've got Giants of the Earth, Jamarian Sharp, along with Moussa Cisse on the fold, giving you combined about 8.5 rebounds and nearly 4 blocks per contest. But Ole Miss, they do shoot a very good clip from three-point range, about 37% as a collective. Pretty much everyone, sans Allen Flanagan, among their top 6 scorers have made at least 1 3, shoot at least 35% from the outside. And when it comes to this Ole Miss team, they've been a little bit touch and go with regards to the way that they've been guarding the arc, but fortunately for them, Texas A&M doesn't do a great job with that regard. But you do have Wade Taylor IV, who's able to give you 18 plus points per contest, while Anderson Garcia has actually been one of your top 3-point shooters, shooting in the high 30s from 3-point range. He's been able to give you about 9 or so rebounds per contest. It's an A&M team that they turn the ball over about 10 times per game, so they've actually done a really good job at just being able to have clean possessions. They just haven't maximized them. Well, for this Ole Miss team, they do allow opponents to shoot 34.5% from 3-point range away from home, while Texas A&M allows opponents to shoot 34% away from home as well. So, did set my total at a 141, at a 140.5, looking at the overhand. We'll take 5.5 or more here with A&M. 773, 774 on the betting board. It is one of our favorites for you country music fans. It is the Georgia-Florida line, and we've got no numbers currently up on this game, but that said, I do have my handicap for this one, as I did set Florida as an 8.5 point favorite, and in terms of the total, I set mine more around a 160.5. So 160 or less, looking at the over, 161 or higher, the under, and with Florida, I'm willing to lay up to 8 with them, 8 or 9 or more. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Georgia. It's a Georgia unit that has been just very strange all season long. They don't do one thing great, they don't do one thing terrible. They go up against a Florida unit that has really been able to do a nice job of hitting the glass. They're a top 15 team in all of college basketball with regards to their rebound rate. And for Florida, they do have some pretty demonstrative home and road splits. 71st in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but that's 27.5% that opponents shoot from 3-point range at home in a road or neutral court environment. That does ascend up to about 36.2%. And for Florida, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, overall they're about 179th, giving up 12 more points per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But Georgia, they're about 183rd with this respect as well. And for Georgia, they are very much based around Noah Thomason, along with Jabari Abdul-Rahim, being able to give you about 25 points per contest to really flow the backcourt. They have been turning the ball over nearly 12 times per contest. That's been a little bit of an issue, but sans Russell Chewa, who's been able to do a nice job giving you about 7 rebounds per game. It's rough for Georgia down low. They're only about 200th in the country with their rebound rate, and I do think that Florida going to be able to eat them alive down low. And for Florida, the backcourt has been able to do a better job recently. Walter Clayton, Zion Pullen, they're pulling in buckets, combined about 32.7 points per contest, with Pullen 5 assists, shoots 44.5% for 3, while Clayton does give you about 36% 3-point shooting for a Florida team that they're 12 turnovers per game, given their tempo, top 30 team with regards to total possessions per game. That's pretty acceptable. Riley Kugel has been able to give you about 9.5 points per contest as well. And for Georgia, it's a little bit more of a top-heavy team that doesn't have a lot of guys that they're able to look to be able to get a bucket. They've scored now 70 points or fewer in 4 of the last 5 games. Meanwhile, you got a Florida unit that they have been giving it up on defense. They're coming off of a rough loss against Vanderbilt, and now they have given up at least 74 points in each of their last 4 games. In terms of the offense, they've gotten to at least 76 points in now each of their last 5. So, interesting circumstance here. 160 or less, looking over 161 or higher. The under, and before it, 108 with them. 9 or more taking those points with Georgia. 775, 776 on the betting board. It is USC and Arizona doing battle from lovely Las Vegas, and you've got USC currently as an 8 to a 9-point underdog. Total on this game is anywhere between 156.5 to 157, and I've had to upgrade USC with them now getting Boogie Ellis along with Isaiah Collier back at the fold, but set my line at 11.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Arizona now. Arizona did not cover the 2 meetings that you saw in the regular season, and Arizona, they did not win when it came to the regular season finale, but I do feel like Arizona wasn't necessarily going full bore in that one. I think that they're going to be sticking a few more chips in the basket in this one with an Arizona unit that has just been so good on the glass. They are number 1 in all of college basketball with regards to the rebound rate. Umar Ball, 13 points, 10 boards, a block per contest for an Arizona team that they do take a drop off with both their offense and their defense away from home. This is a defense that they're going to drop off by about 20 points surrendered per 100 possessions away from home rather than when they are at home. And certainly with Arizona, they have been one of the most lively offenses in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're in the top 10 in all of college basketball. That also falls off by about 10, 12 points per 100 possessions when they're away from home, but Got a USC team that's about 300th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. USC also takes a drop off of about 9 points per 100 possession scored when away from home, and they're 193rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, well outside the top 225 with regards to rebound rate as well as for USC. Typically, this is a bunch that does a really good job down low. DJ Rodman is right now the only guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. Now, Ellis and Collier both entered into this tournament, averaging 16.6 points per contest, combining for about 7 assists per game, and Ellis is a 42% three-point shooter, while DJ Rodman is a 38% three-point shooter, but past that, you haven't been able to get a lot. It's been a lost season for Bronny James, who's only been able to give you about 5 points per contest. Actually had a relatively solid effort against Washington yesterday, but all in all, it's been tough for them with USC. They're also turning the ball over about 12.5 times per contest, and Caleb Love, he has been cooking along with Pell Larson. These two guys have played really well off of one another with a combined about 7 assists per contest. It's been a little bit touch and go for Kylan Boswell, but still gives you about 3.5 assists per contest. His scoring has not necessarily been there. He's been able to give you 10 points per contest, but when you need him, he has been there. He's been able to shoot about 40% from three-point range overall for the season. I do think that Arizona going to be able to go out there, dominate on the boards, and atone for the loss that they took a few days ago. I did set my total at 159.5. I do think that you get very much an up-tempo game and a USC team that's well outside the top 200 with regards to points allowed on a per-possession basis. So looking at the over, and with Arizona 1 to 11 with them. 777, 778 on the betting board. It is Oregon, and they're going to be playing against UCLA. This is a UCLA bunch as a 2.5 to a 3-point underdog. Total this game between 130 and 131, and semi-line at 2.5. Won't take the 3 with UCLA. This was an opener of 4, so I do agree with the line movement. Wouldn't be willing to go anything below 3, but I do think the UCLA holds in there because I do think that Adam Bona, along with Lazer Stefanovic, going to be able to do a solid job on the glass. Both of these guys have been able to give you 6 boards per contest apiece. It's an Oregon team that has been better on the glass ever since N'Faly Dante and his 8 rebounds per game have been back in the fold, but Nate Biddle being out has been really hurting this team. As a result, they're still, for the season, only about 168th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Not that this UCLA team has been anything extraordinary as well. They're about 173rd, but UCLA top 100 team in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line. It's been able to travel relatively well. They do need a little bit more from the outside themselves. Other than Lazer Stefanovic, who shoots 38.5% from 3-point range, you pretty much have one other guy, Will McClendon, that gives you north of 2 points per contest. That shoots above 30% from 3-point range. Adam Mara, this guy has been just a complete buster-rooney for this team, but you do also have some relatively good production. I have Dylan Andrews, who's able to give you 12 points per game. And then for Oregon, I have guys that are able to stroke it from 3-point range. Jermaine Cuisinart, Jackson Shell said they've been able to combine to shoot about 34.5% for 3. Both of these guys combined to give you about 28.5 points per contest. But outside of Dante, you don't have a single guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. KJ Evans has been touch and go, 8 points, 5 boards, but he just has not been able to put up good numbers recently. 7 points or fewer scored in 4 of the last 5 games. It's an Oregon team that they run pretty efficient offense. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. They shoot about 34.5% from 3-point range, but away from home, they allow opponents to shoot north of 37% from 3-point range as well. I don't think that that's as much of an issue in this game with USC just not being a great 3-point shooting team, but for Oregon, only about 99th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. UCLA well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions game, though I feel like we went a little bit too low with this total because I do think that this could come down to late game throwing, and Oregon, they just have not been the same defense that they have been in past years. So it is a circumstance where semi-total 132.5. I'm looking at the over and at 3+, looking at those points with UCLA. 779, 780 on the betting board. It is Washington State taking on Stanford, and there are no numbers up on this game, so this is off the board. But that said, I have got my handicap as I did set Washington State as a 7-point favorite. I made this total a 143, so 142.5 or less. When I had the over 143.5 or higher, the under a 1 to lay up to 6.5 here with Washington State, 7.5 or more. Going to be willing to take a look at those points with Stanford. It's a Washington State unit that has been one of the better defenses on the West Coast, top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Washington State, they've done a really nice job of just being able to get going. Isaac Jones, who's been able to give you 15.5 points, 7.5 boards. It's a Washington State team that is a top 80 team with regards to rebound rate. Stanford, well outside the top 150 with that regard. In Stanford, they shoot at home north of 41% from 3-point range, sub 34.5% away from home. They see a drop off of north of 15 points per 100 possessions scored when away from home. They actually give up a point less per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, but Now they have to bounce back from an overtime game as well. Max mean rate on it has been rock solid, 15.5 points, 9.5 boards per contest, shoots about 39% from 3 for a Sanford team that overall, they shoot 37.5% from 3, but Kenan Carlisle's not been the same down the stretch. He's now supplied the team with 12 points or fewer in pretty much all of their last 6 games. After this guy was just a complete rocket ship towards the beginning part of conference play. You've been able to get some okay production out of Brandon Angel. He's been able to give you about 13 points per contest, but got a lot of size, you've got a lot of versatility, and no way of being able to use it, which is not great to say the least. Meanwhile, for Washington State, you've been able to have Miles Rice supply the team with about 15 points per contest. For a Washington State team that it just feels like they do everything relatively well and relatively smart. That's why they call it nerd ball with this team, but they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. You've got a Sanford team that does not do a great job of being able to generate turnovers, and Sanford, while outside the top 240 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, it is a Washington State team that can be a little bit touch and go with regards to perimeter defense, but I do think that they're going to be able to do a solid job holding up in this spot for Washington State. They allow opponents to shoot just 32.5% from three-point range away from home, so 6.5 or less willing to lay it with Washington State, 7.5 or more taking the points with Sanford, and with Sanford, I do think that they're going to be bogged down in this game by a Washington State team well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, so 142.5 or less, willing to have the over 143.5 for the under. 781, 782 on the betting board. Utah and Colorado do battle up there in the Pac-12 tournament. Another game without numbers, but that said, I've got my handicap with Colorado. I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite with a total of 152.5. So 4 or less willing to lay with Colorado, 5 or more taking those points with Utah, and then 152 or less looking at the over, 153 or higher the under. And when it comes to Colorado, they have been night and day different with regards to their shooting at home rather than on the road. And you'll always notice that these Colorado teams have some very demonstrative home and road splits. But for Colorado, overall for the season, 26th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. That takes a fall off of about 11.3 points per 100 possessions when they're away from home. But you got a Utah unit that has been giving up north of 22 points more per 100 possessions when away from home rather than at home. But here's the kicker with this Colorado team. At home, they have been one of the best three-point shooting teams that you're able to find in all of college basketball, shooting 42.7% at home from distance, 36.3% in a road/short environment. So that's going to come back to hurt them a little bit, but they have a Utah unit that they ain't giving up from three-point range away from home at about a clip of 37.1%. And this Colorado team has been well outside the top 75 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. They allow opponents away from home to shoot 36.5% from the outside. And the big key for Utah being able to hold in there, Brandon Carlson, who's able to give you 17 points, 7 boards, 7-footer that's able to pop in from three-point range, and that's big against a Colorado team that has so much versatility. As you've been able to have Tristan Da Silva, who's saying 6'8", shooting in the high 30s from three-point range. He's been able to supply the team within that neighborhood of about 15 to 16 points per contest. KJ Simpson, 19.5 points, 5.5 boards, 5 assists, shoots 45% from three-point range for a unit that, as a whole, they shoot 40% from three. And just take a look at this Colorado team. Aside from Eddie Lampkin, who has not been able to make a three all season long, every one of your scorers that averages at least 3 points per contest for the season is shooting at least 37.5% from three, and all but one of them shooting at least 39.5% from distance. And this is a Colorado team that does rank in the top 20 with regards to rebound rate. So even though the defense, it can come and go a little bit, they should be able to win that battle on the glass. But Davion Smith doling up 6 emphasis per contest for this Utah team in place of Raleigh Worcester has been very big for them. You've also been able to get some relatively good production out of someone like Gabe Manson, who shoots nearly 40% for three-point range. He supplies you with double figures as well. So circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with Colorado, 5 or more taking the points with Utah, and then 152 or less looking over, 153 or higher the under. 783, 784 on the betting board. Utah State and Fresno State do battle from lovely Las Vegas for the Mountain West tournament, and with Utah State, they are a favorite of 12.5 points. Total this game is 142 to 142.5, and I did set Utah State as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm willing to take 12 plus here with Fresno State. Last time these two teams played, it was very recently. Fresno State actually did a really nice job of causing Utah State to sweat that game out, and for Utah State, it does feel like they're just starting to hit a little bit of a wall. Now, Grado Sabor, he has been great. He's supplying this Utah team with north of 14 points, actually north of 17 points, more like 9 rebounds per game, and for Fresno State, they've been getting trucked on the glass all season long. They're well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. Utah State, they're a top 50 team with this regard, and Utah State has been able to do a really good job with their road defense. They're a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. One of the best teams at being able to guard the three-point arc. They're going to find in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, number 2 in all of college basketball with that respect, but for Utah State, it's really come and gone in terms of this offense, as they don't necessarily shoot it amazing from 3 points. Darius Brown, the second-year main point guard, along with Ian Martinez, they combine for 26 points per contest, and both of these guys shoot it well from 3, with Brown, his best attribute is him not turning the ball over. 6.5 assists to 1.8 turnovers per game. He shoots 40.5% from 3. Ian Martinez shoots 30.5% from the outside as well, but as a team, they only shoot about 33.5% from the outside. They go up against a Fresno State team that the lifeblood of this offense is really being able to bury threes, as you've got Donovan Yap, Xavier Dussel combined shoot 37.5% for the outside, about 21 points per contest for a Fresno State team that has been a little bit better in not turning the ball over, but still 12.5 turnovers per game. They're outside the top 280 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. So ever since you've been having a few injuries along the just front in general, as you've got Eduardo Andre 3000 deal with an injury, he was one of your best low post presence, and Donovan Yap has been out of the fold. He's been able to come back. It's been Isaiah Pope who's really been able to step up, giving 9 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. I do think that Fresno State does find a way to be able to weasel their way into this one. Fresno State have been riding a long losing streak prior to busting through yesterday, but for Fresno State, they have been able to keep things relatively close against better competition. Last time these two teams played, it was a 77-73 overtime game, in which Fresno State in that one only shot 7-28 from 3-point range, and they were able to just hold in there because they had won the turnover battle. And Utah State just feels like it's starting to get a little bit sloppier with things. So I did set my line at 11.5, willing to take 12 plus here with Fresno State, and made my total 141.5. This is a Fresno State team that, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percent, well outside the top 3 are, but Utah State, not an amazing 3-point shooting team. Well, they do a nice job locking it down from 3-point range. So looking at the under and the points with Fresno State, 785, 786 on the betting board. UNLV and San Diego State to battle from the Thomas Mack Center. UNLV is a underdog of between 4 and 5 points, opened up at 3, and total on this game is saying between 132.5 and 133. I did say UNLV as an underdog of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the 4.5 to 5 with UNLV. They are going to be most likely without one of the Boone brothers. That's going to be a bit of an issue for them, but the guy that I think is going to be able to keep them lively is Dedrin Thomas. He's been able to do a nice job with Thomas. He's able to give you 36% 3-point shooting, 13.5 points, 5 assists per contest. They go up against a San Diego State unit that has been able to lock it down with their defense all season long. This is a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a top 35 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they've got James Ledee down low, who's been amazing with 8 rebounds per game. They're going to have the advantage down low against this UNLV team in terms of their rebound rate, but he is the only guy, Ledee is, that gives the San Diego State team north of 4 rebounds per game. You've got Micah Parrish, Reese Dixon Waters, who combine for about 20.5 points per contest, and Waters shoots 39% from 3, but that's all San Diego State, well outside the top 255 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and it's a UNLV team that's been able to ascend with their offense as the season has went along. They're into the top 120 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for UNLV, as hard as it is to do, you have to erase a lot of the metrics for this team, because if you look at the metrics themselves, I mean, it's been a rough year for them, though they are 63rd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They've been able to ascend with that regard, but San Diego State just hasn't gotten a lot out of Lamont Butler, Darian Trammell. These two guys, they combine for about 6 assists, 2.5 turnovers per game, but both are shooting below 30% from 3-point range. Both have not necessarily been able to put the ball in the basket in general, and with UNLV, with the improved guard play, even though you're probably going to have one of the Boone brothers out of the fold, you still have someone like Luis Rodriguez who's able to give you 6.5 boards, 11 points per contest, just a do-it-all, Swiss Army knife sort of guy. Jackie Johnson has been able to give you a bit from the outside. I do think that UNLV, on their own floor, it's not necessarily going to be true home court advantage, but it's still quite an advantage. They're going to be able to hold in there in a game that I think is going to be a low-scoring slog. Set by total 132, looking at the under and looking at the points with UNLV. 787, 788 on the betting board. It is Nevada and Colorado State doing battle from the Thomas Mack Center, and with Nevada, they are a 2.5-point favorite. Your total on this game is 138.5, and with Nevada, set them as a 2-point favorite. Here at the 2.5, I'm going to be wanting to take those points with Colorado State. Nevada does the little things really well. They're in the top 40 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're a top 50 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They don't really get out of sorts. They do a nice job not allowing second chances, but they're not like a dominant team on the glass. Only guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, Nick Davidson. He's able to supply 12 points, 7.5 boards per contest, and when it comes to Jared Lucas, he's a nice go-to scorer. 40% 3-point shooter, 18 points per game. While Keenan Blackshear, he does it all. 5 boards, 5 assists, 15 points, steal and half per contest, though he doesn't shoot it well from 3. I guess he does everything except for one thing, but for Colorado State, even though it's been a little bit touch and go for this team, even though you can tell that in Mountain West play, it felt like they plateaued a little bit too much and they've been taking a little bit of a drop off. This is still a Colorado State unit that is able to put up points, and for Colorado State, they've got Isaiah Stevens, who's going to be, in my opinion, the best player in this game, with no disrespect due to Mr. Jared Lucas. He's been able to give the team 17 points, 7 assists, shoots 45.5% from 3 points for a Colorado State team that they can be a little bit hit or miss in terms of their overall defense, but this has been an offense that has been able to do a relatively solid job all season long. Patrick Cartier shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. He had 6'8", has been able to supply this team with about 11 points per contest, and then Nikwe Clifford, Joel Scott, they've been able to combine for 13 boards, 25 points per game. I love what these guys are able to bring to the table for an offense that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they've been one of the better ones that you're going to find in all of college basketball at 42nd. They do take a fall of about 9.5 points fewer scored per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, but for Colorado State, their defense has been really one that hasn't varied too much away from home. They only give up 2 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, with Colorado State doing a nice job taking care of the ball. Only turn the ball over about 10 times per contest. I think that you're going to see a very efficient, clean game. You got a Nevada team that has scored at least 74 points on their 7-game win streak, and pretty much every one of them, and have been able to rock and roll with that regard. But that said, you've got a Colorado State team that, as well, they've been able to ascend a little bit more with their defense, giving up 73 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So here at North of 2, I'm going to be willing to take those points, and did set my total on 140. I think that this is close enough for late game following. I think both of these teams really approach 70, so going to be looking at the points and the over. 789, 790 on the betting board. Boise State and New Mexico do battle from the Thomas Mack Center with Boise State. They are a pick-em to a 1-point favorite. Total on this game, 153.5. I'm going to New Mexico here. I set them as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm looking at New Mexico outright on the money line. It's a New Mexico bunch at lots of Boise State twice during the regular season, but I do think that time number 3 is going to be the charm, as Boise State has been one of the best teams in all of college basketball on the glass, because you've got Tyson Dagenhart, you've got Omar Sandley, both of these guys combining for about 12.5 rebounds per game, but you've also got on the flip side for New Mexico a team that's able to control things with not only Junior Joseph, JT Toppin being able to combine for about 17 rebounds per game. If you're looking at overall rebound rates for the season, this Mexico team has been sort of hiding in plain sight. New Mexico 46th in all of college basketball with regards to their rebound rate. It's a Boise State team that they've been able to check in more in that neighborhood of about 18th in the country, but with New Mexico as well, we always want to talk about the offense and the trio in the backcourt. Jamal Mashburn Jr., Jalen Ellis, Donovan Dent, these 3 guys being able to combine for about 45 points per contest. Where the bread has been buttered for New Mexico has been being able to play some relatively good defense. It does take quite a bit of a drop-off when they're away from home, but still, 46th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. Meanwhile, in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, they, for much of the season, has been much better on the front of the defense, as they're checking in 37th in all of college basketball in this regard. We've got a Boise State team that they do a relatively solid job of being able to get some nice 3-point shooting out of Chibuzo Egbo, who's been able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range. But the issue that I've got with this Boise State team, Cam Martin, 6'9", a little bit of a do-it-all player. He's been the main facilitator with about 2.5 assists per contest. You don't have that one dominant ball handler for Boise State. Now, it hasn't caused for too many turnovers yet, only about 11 turnovers per contest, but that's something in the back of my mind is a bit of an issue, and it's a top-heavy Boise State team. You're able to throw in their Max Rice, who's able to give you 12.5 points per contest, but you've got your top 4 scorers giving you at least 12.5 points per contest. You've got nobody else that gives you north of 6.1 points per game, and you've got pretty much 7 guys that give you north of 3.5 points per contest. So it's a thin rotation with New Mexico. You've got a little bit more depth. You've got someone like Mustafa Amzil who's able to give you 7 points per contest. Shoots it from 3-point range as a 6'8", a little bit of a combo player. Jamero Baker shoots 40% from 3-point range. So I do think that New Mexico, a top 20 team with regards to being able to take care of the ball, fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, while they themselves have been able to generate turnovers. And for New Mexico, they've gotten to at least 77 points each of their last 4 games. Got a Boise State unit that has been able to ascend with their offense as well, at least 79 points in 4 of their last 5 games. They're going to be taking part in a nice higher scoring expose. Did set my total at 153.5. Seeing a few 153s out there, looking at the over to go along New Mexico outright on the money line. 791, 792 on the betting board. Niagara and Marist do battle from Atlantic City, and Marist, they are a underdog of a point to a point and a half. Total on this game is between 128.5 and 129, and when it comes to Niagara, I did set them as an underdog of 1.5 points. I'm willing to trust Marist on the money line. Marist has been a top 10 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and this is despite the fact that they're outside the top 125 with regards to rebound rate. But you've got a Niagara team that's also well outside the top 125 with that regard, and for Niagara, they've shot it really well from three-point range away from home. They're shooting about 40% from distance. I think the Marist is going to be able to put the clamps down on that. Marist is allowing opponents in a road/neutral-court environment to shoot 31.6% from three-point range. That is a top 50 mark in all of college basketball, and for Marist, while they've been able to do a nice job of being able to guard the arc, they've been able to ascend a little bit more themselves in terms of their offense. It's still not great. They're still well outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but if I had someone like a Jackson Price be able to shoot 40% from three-point range, supplying this team with 7 points per contest for Marist, the 12.5 turnovers per game, we'd like to see them cut down on that, but Niagara, they don't necessarily do a great job of being able to force the issue, force a lot of turnovers. Max Allen has been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest, and then you've been able to get 38.5% three-point shooting out of Josh Passarelli, who's been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest. Overall, for Marist, they are shooting about 35% from three-point range. Flip side, you've got a Niagara team that does have Harlan Obiana down low. He's going to be the best overall rebounder in this game. He's able to give you 8 rebounds per game. Nobody else, though, on this Niagara team. They give you north of 4.6 rebounds per game, and for Niagara, it's been just rough for them on defense in general in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 227th in all of college basketball, though very interestingly with Niagara, when they leave home, they actually give up about 7.5 points fewer per 100 possessions rather than when they are at home. For Marist, I mean, they've been good at home. They've been good on the road. They've been able to put the clamps down all season long. So it's a very interesting circumstance. Did set my total 129.5. I think that this is going to be a nip and tuck game. It is a Marist team that's starting to ascend a little bit more with regards to their three-point shooting, and it's a Niagara team that has been giving it up from three-point range. 249th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, at 38.3% at home, 32.5% away from home, but I do think that Marist finds a way to be able to get the job done where both teams get right around 65. So looking at the 128.5 over, and Marist on the money line, 793, 794 on the betting board. Ryder and St. Peter's who battle from Atlantic City. Ryder is a point favorite, and your totals between 129 to 130, and with Ryder, I did set them as a underdog of 2 points. I'm going to be looking at St. Peter's here on the money line. St. Peter's has been able to ascend a little bit with their offense. They're still well outside the top 225 with that regard, but having Corey Washington become that go-to scorer with about 16.5 points per contest, that's been big. While St. Peter's, they continue to be that top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This was a opening total of 130.5, down to about 129 now, and I'm going to be taking a look at the over because you've got a Ryder team that has been touch and go with their defense, to say the least, outside the top 200 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and a Ryder team that's relatively mid-tempo, about 170th in all of college basketball with regards to total possessions per game. St. Peter's, they do play quite a bit more slowly. They're 11th in the country with this respect, but if you look at St. Peter's recently, they've been speeding things up just a little bit more, and the St. Peter's team is able to take misses and be able to still get points because they're a top 30 team in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound. They go up against a Ryder unit that only sees a drop-off, by the way, of about 2 points per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And if you look at the overall season numbers for Ryder, they're a solid three-point shooting team. Not great, not terrible. As a collective, they're shooting about 34.3% from three, but if you look ever since the turn of the new year, they've been shooting north of 37% from three-point range for a Ryder team that is in the top 100 with regards to their rebound rate. Mervyn James, Tariq Ingram, TJ Weeks, that'll give you at least 6 rebounds per game with Mervyn James. 19.6 boards, shoots 47.5% from three-point range. Weeks shoots 35% from three-point range, and then you've been able to have some good three-point shooting out of a guy in Corey McKeithen who's been able to give you about 3.5 assists, shoots 35% from the outside, but Ryder does turn the ball over about 12.5 times per contest. The St. Peter's team is a top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Latrell Reed gives you 4.8 assists to about 2.5 turnovers per game. And for St. Peter's, doesn't sound like much, but they're up to now shooting about 33% from three-point. They've been able to ascend with that respect as well. And for St. Peter's, this bunch has really been able to get their offense going with at least 69 points so far their last 5 games, while Ryder has given up 61 or fewer in each of their last 3. But I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to put some points upon the board. Last time these two teams played, it was 61-56, a day where they went a combined 7 of 28 from three-point range. I do think that both teams are going to be a little bit warmer from the floor, and both teams had 17 turnovers in that game. Both of these teams are going to commit their fair share of turnovers, but I think it's going to be a little bit cleaner. Looking at the over, and St. Peter's on the money line, 785, 796 on the betting board. UTEP and Liberty do battle from Huntsville, Alabama, and with Liberty, they're a 3.5 point favorite on scheme between 134 to 134.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Liberty. I did set Liberty as a favorite of 4.5 points in this spot. Got a UTEP team that does an amazing job of being able to generate turnovers, but they don't do anything other than generate turnovers. They're a top 25 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but as a whole, they only shoot about 32% from three. I do like what Tay Hardy is able to bring to the table. 15 plus points, shoots in the high 30s from 3-point range. And for UTEP, even if they don't generate a turnover, they are relatively solid at being able to guard the 3-point arc. And that is big because a lot of these teams that they gamble for turnovers, they are bunches that they don't necessarily guard the 3-point arc well. I'm looking at you, old Florida International, but that said, with Liberty, this is just the more well-rounded team. For UTEP, in terms of rebound rate, they're well outside the top 225 with that regard. Meanwhile, for Liberty, you've been able to have Zach Cleveland be able to provide you with 6 boards, 12 points per contest. It is a Liberty team that might have a little bit of an issue being able to bomb it from 3-point range with Kyle Rohde along with Keenan Menethe, your 2 top scorers. Combined shoot about 39.5% from 3. They give you about 27.5 points per contest, but this is also a Liberty team that they do a nice job of being able to hold on to the ball. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, top 75 team in all of college basketball with regards to turnovers committed on a per possession basis, and they're out for revenge. Last time these two teams faced off, that was on Liberty's home floor. That was 67-51 in that game. Liberty did commit 17 turnovers, but first time these two teams played, Liberty was able to do a far better job on that front. That was a game that Liberty was able to play, and they were able to get the job done 67-65 on the road. So both of these teams actually won on each other's home court. And in that first game, Liberty more like 14 turnovers, while UTEP had 18, and that's part of it with UTEP as well. They generate a lot of turnovers, but they give the ball away as well. You got Kevin Kalu who's able to give you about 5 rebounds per contest as well, but with UTEP having a bit of a disadvantage on the glass with this Liberty team, not saying that they're amazing on the glass, but you've got someone like a Kyle Van Zandt who's able to give you about 6 or so rebounds per game. Liberty as a whole, in terms of their rebound rate, they're clocking in 211th in all of college basketball. Should be just enough to get past a UTEP team that's more around 300th. Did semi-total 134.5. Both of these games were slogs the first few times around, but I do think that this is going to be close enough for late game felling, and if Liberty can break that pressure, they've got a lot of open shots. So looking at the over and willing to lay up to 4 with Liberty. 797, 798 on the betting board. Western Kentucky and New Mexico do battle from Huntsville, and Western Kentucky is a 7 to 7.5 point favorite. Total on this game is anywhere between 147 to 148. I did set Western Kentucky as an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with New Mexico State. This just feels like a little bit of a disjointed unit. They had come together as a team after the whole hazing scandal last season. This is just a bunch of pieces that were put together on the fly, and you've been able to get some relatively good scoring out of Femi Odekale along Christian Cook. They both give you about 11 points per contest. Odekale, though, has to do it all. 6.5 assists, 3 assists per contest, and they go up against Western Kentucky team that has been a top 75 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 75 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. And for New Mexico State, it's not even like they're able to control the glass. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of their rebound rate. Meanwhile, Western Kentucky, they've been a top 85 team on that front as well. Now, they are not necessarily a great 3-point shooting team in Western Kentucky. They turn the ball over 14 times per contest, shoot about 33.5% from 3-point range, but Todd McHenry is 15 points, 39% 3-point shooting. That has been absolutely massive. You've been able to have Rodney Howard give you about 5 boards. Has been a relatively solid rim protector for the team, and this Western Kentucky team, they just gun it. They are a top 25 team with regards to total possessions per game. New Mexico State, they just have been rhymeless and reasonless, and they just have not been able to generate a whole bunch of scoring. 66 points or fewer scored in 4 out of their last 5 games. Now, last time these two teams faced off, New Mexico State, they gave up 72, which is pretty solid, but they only scored 58 points of their own. For New Mexico State, this bunch in regulation, they just have not been able to really bust out too much. Since the turn of the new year, they've been able to get past the 72-point plateau in regulation just twice. So I do think that this is going to be a bit of a bog-down game, though I do think that Western Kentucky still going to be able to get theirs. Did semi-total at a 148. This opened up at a 148.5. You're at the 147.5. Looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7.5 here with Western Kentucky. Made them an 8-point favorite. 799, 800 on the betting board. Cal Baptist and Seattle U do battle from lovely Las Vegas, and this is a game without numbers, but I've got my handicap. I set Seattle as a 7.5 point favorite with a total of 131.5. 7 or less, want to lay the numbers 8 or higher, going to be taking a look at the points with Cal Baptist, and then 131 or less, looking over 132 or higher, going to be diving in on the under. It's a Seattle U team that has been amazing with their defense, top 35 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Seattle. They're much more well-rounded than they were a season ago. Last year, it was all about can Cam Tyson make a play for them, and they really didn't have much else. And Cam Tyson, still the top scorer for this team. He's able to give you 18 points, shoots 38% for three. Would like to see Seattle clean up on the turnovers. Bottom 100 team with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis. But Brandon Chatfield, Kobe Williamson, they combine for about 12 boards, about 2.5 blocks per contest. Alex Shoemaker, Jason Christophilius, they combine for about 26.5 points, with Christophilius shooting 40.5% from three-point range. And the Seattle team has really been solid with their defense. 70 points or fewer surrendered in regulation in all but 3 out of their last 13 games going up against Cal Baptist team that without Dominic Daniels, who's been able to give you 19 points per contest, this team just has not been able to generate offense. Blonder Chiquinho gives you 12 points per game, but he shoots below 30% from three-point for a Cal Baptist team that they're solid with regards to their rebounding. You've got Ivan Odriogo along with Hunter Goodrick combining for about 17 rebounds per game. It's a Cal Baptist team that also isn't bad along the perimeter as well. They allow opponents to shoot about 33.5% from three. That's national average, 165th in all of college basketball. And overall, this is a Cal Baptist team that is a top 100 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but they've just been able to get absolutely nothing generated over the last few months in terms of their offense, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This Cal Baptist team, 249th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've been able to get a little bit more out of some of these guys out there in the backcourt. And for Daniels, he should be good to go in this one. Played his first game in quite some time against Utah Valley, and that was a game in which the team was able to get the job done by kind of 74-63. But with him having not played in over a month and this being a back-to-back spot, you have to wonder how much that's going to be taking out of him. And I mean, it's a Cal Baptist team that they do play at a bottom 75 mark in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, so that's going to bog this game down just a little bit. And that game for Cal Baptist was just the second time in their last 6 games that they had exceeded the 65-point plateau. Meanwhile, for Seattle, this team has been holding up on defense all season long. So circumstance where set by total 131.5, 131 or less, looking over 132 or higher. The unders with Seattle, 1 away up to 7 with them, 8 or more taking those points with Cal Baptist. 801, 802 on the betting board. Back out there for the WAC tournament. It's going to be one of these two teams, so I have to project forward a little bit here. It's either going to be Abilene Christian or Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin going up against UT Arlington. This is a game that is going to overtime, and it's 11 o'clock p.m. Pacific time as I record this, so I have to sort of give both sides of it here. Total is going to be relatively the same. In Stephen F. Austin versus UT Arlington, made my total aware of 143.5 or less, looking at the over 144.5 or higher to the under. I made UT Arlington against Stephen F. Austin a 4-point favorite. That would probably ascend to being like a 5 to a 5.5 point line against Abilene Christian, as I don't find a lot of differences between Stephen F. Austin along with Abilene Christian. Both of these teams do an amazing job of being able to generate turnovers. Abilene Christian does a little bit of a better job of being able to guard the 3-point arc, while Stephen F. Austin does a much better job on the glass. And for UT Arlington, against Abilene Christian, they would be able to dominate the glass. You've got two guys down low that have been very rock solid in DeJuan Gordon along with Shamar Wilson, who are able to combine for about 16 rebounds per game. So I do think that would be a little bit more of a favorable matchup for UT Arlington, because they're not necessarily a team that lights it up from three-point range. They shoot about 34.5% from the outside. They've got one guy in Makai Williams who's been able to shoot about 45.5% from the outside. I like the game of Philip Russell. He's been able to give you 13.5 points, shoots about 35% from three-point range, but that said, it's a UT Arlington team that as well, against both of these teams, are going to have their struggles because they are outside the top tier with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis, and both of these teams do a nice job of being able to generate them. Stephen F. Austin, they have a few more turnovers themselves, and it looks like they just won that game against Abilene Christian, so that is going to be one where it looks like Stephen F. Austin is going to indeed be taking on UT Arlington, and that's big because with this Stephen F. Austin team, you've got Latrell Jostle, who's become the go-to scorer for this team. He's been able to supply the team with about 17 points per contest, as they've been dealing with the injury to Day Hall, who was once again out of the fold yesterday. But you do have quite a few guys that do a nice job by committee of being able to man the glass as well. It's Stephen F. Austin in the top 50 with regards to overall rebound rate. This despite the fact that you don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. You've got guys like Nana Ati, Boasico, Jaleel Berbrun, who've been able to give you about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game. And for Stephen F. Austin, he's shooting about 33% from three-point range. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit of an all-over-the-place airbring game. By the way, Stephen F. Austin hit pretty much a 3 at the buzzer to be able to win that game against Abilene Christian, so no overtime there. Did set UT Arlington as a favorite to wear. I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 or more. Looking at Stephen F. Austin, then 143.5 or less. Looking at the over 144.5 or higher. Going to be diving in on this total under. Now, I do have to project forward on this one because this is a game that's going to be going to overtime. 8:03, 8:04. It's a Big West game to be determined between Cal State Northridge and UC Santa Barbara going up against Hawaii. So a very interesting circumstance here. And with CSUN, if they do face off against Hawaii, this would be a circumstance where I'd be setting Hawaii as about a 4.5 to a 5-point favorite, depending upon how this overtime goes, with a total to where a 143.5 or so is where I'd be setting that total. Meanwhile, if they do go up against UC Santa Barbara, that would be a total that I'd probably be setting a little bit closer to about a 140 or so, because what's interesting about UC Santa Barbara, they give up about 8 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. And if it is UC Santa Barbara against Hawaii, I'd be setting Santa Barbara as more of a 2 to a 2.5 point underdog. Once again, a little bit dependent upon how overtime goes. I do have to project forward a little bit more on this one since we've got an overtime game, and I'm recording this at less than 11 p.m. Pacific time for a podcast that has to be up at midnight. But that said, when it comes to this Hawaii team, they've done a nice job of being able to lock it down from 3-point range. They're a top 100 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, and that's really been the bread and butter recently for Hawaii, just being able to play some very solid defense in terms of just games that have wrapped up in regulation, because they have played a few that have went to overtime. This bunch has now given up 70 points or fewer, and I believe now all but 2 out of their last 7, so they've been able to do a relatively solid job on that front. For Hawaii, you've got a team that's been hot and cold from 3-point range, shooting about 34% from 3-point range. Noel Coleman has been your main man, giving you 14 points, a little bit over a steal per contest, but they do an okay job on the glass. Justin McCoy, along with Bernardo da Silva, these two guys, they've been able to combine for about 13 rebounds per game. And if you look at Hawaii's overall rebound rate, they're about 121st in all of college basketball, so relatively respectable there if they go up against Santa Barbara or Northridge. Both of these teams are top 75 teams with regards to their rebound rate, and Santa Barbara has been better on the road rather than at home, but they've been the more inconsistent team. Santa Barbara, you've got your top scorer in A.J. Mitchell, so able to give you 19 points per contest. They're perhaps a little bit better on the glass. I feel like this Northridge team, they've got a little bit more depth. Deshaun Ellen-Aikens, Deontay Bostic, they've been able to combine for about 31 points per contest, and this Hawaii team, they've had some struggles with both of them, but I do think that the more difficult matchup for them would be Santa Barbara. They've got the higher ceiling. You've got the, in my opinion, better floor, though, with this bunch in CSUN, Cal State Northridge. So if it is like Santa Barbara going up against Hawaii, that would be a number that I'd be setting more around about a 2 to 2.5 with Hawaii being the favorite, more around 4 to 4.5 with it being CSUN, and then closer to about a 140, 141 total if it is Santa Barbara, closer to about a 144 or so, maybe even a 145 if it is old CSUN, Cal State Northridge. So I had to project forward there. My apologies on being a little wishy-washy on that one. And then this is the last game on the Northern Las Vegas betting board before we get the extra games. 805, 806, UC Riverside and Long Beach State do battle from Henderson, Las Vegas. No numbers up on this game, but set Long Beach State as a 3-point favorite and set by total of 149. 2.5 for less, 1 delay with Long Beach State, 3.5 for more. Take a look at the points with UC Riverside, and then 148.5 for less, looking at the over, 149.5 for higher. Going to be looking at the under. It's a Long Beach State team that you've got Traore squared with Abakar Traore along with Lucina Traore. They've been able to combine for about 17.5 rebounds per game. Lucina plays a little bit more in the post. You've got Abakar Traore, who's able to give you about 4 assists per contest. Not really going to pop it from 3, and with Long Beach State, this has never really been a good 3-point shooting team. They're only shooting about 31.5% as a collective, but you go up against a UC Riverside team that, even though they do a nice job of just being able to take care of the ball, with this Riverside bunch in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they're a top 40 team in all of college basketball. You've got 2 guys that do a nice job of being able to headline things in Barrington Hargress, along with Isaiah Moses. They combine for about 24.5 points, about 8.5 assists per contest, but this team just doesn't shoot. They shoot less than 40% from the floor. They shoot 31.5% from 3-point range. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Just a rudderless and strange bunch going up against the Long Beach State team that they're outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well, but they've got the more dominant rebounders in this game, while UC Riverside, they've got one guy in Kyle Owens that gives you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Nobody else gives you north of 4.5 boards per contest. Long Beach State, they can be a little bit hit or miss in the way that they guard the arc, but you just don't have a lot of great shooting really on either side from the outside. Marcus Hiones, he's been able to give you 17 points per contest for Long Beach State, but he's a little bit of a chucker in that he only shoots about 30% from 3 points with Long Beach State. They're now up to about 300th in the country in terms of guarding the 3-point line, but not too much of a concern going up against a UC Riverside team that's had a little bit of a tough time from the arc in general. And with Long Beach State, top 50 team with regards to total possessions per game, Riverside, they've been cranking up their offense recently as well, so it is a circumstance where at a 148.5 or less, looking at the over 149.5 or higher, the under end with Long Beach State, willing to lay up to 2.5 with them, 3.5 for more. Taking a look at the points with Riverside. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-543, 306-544. SWAC tournament out there in Birmingham, Alabama. Jackson State and Texas Southern do battle. Texas Southern 3 to 3.5 point favorites. Total between 140 and 140.5. Since Texas Southern has a 3-point favorite, 3.5 is my buy point on Jackson State. Jackson State looked like they were ascending with something with a Missouri win, but as you know, Missouri's turned out to be a stink burger this year. But that's how with Jackson State, they are going to have the best score in this game. That would be Ken Evans. He's been able to give the team 18.5 points per contest. Throws in there a few assists. Is able to shoot darn near 40% from 3-point. Going against this Texas Southern team that has been very uncharacteristically strange on glass. They're well outside the top 100 with regards to rebound rate, but they've been able to ascend into being a top 85 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, headlined by Jonathan Cisse, PJ Henry. These two guys give you a combined about 28 points per contest, and they're shooting well from 3 as collective. They're shooting 37% from the outside. It is a Texas Southern team, though, that is relatively mid-tempo. They turned the ball over 13 times per game, and Jackson State may have been a relatively rough team in terms of taking care of the ball as well. About 13.5 turnovers per game. Jackson State plays at a little bit higher tempo, but they've had Chase Adams being in and out of the fold. The fact that he was able to come back over the weekend was very big, wasn't playing his full allotment of minutes, and you can tell that his facilitation was off. Only 2 assists in those 2 games overall for the season, averages about 4.2 assists per contest, but I think that he's going to be able to find a little bit more in this spot, and then you've been able to get about 6 boards, 12.5 points per game. Jordan O'Neal, guy that's able to let it fly at about 39% from 3-point, and it's really interesting to take a look at these perimeter defenses because both of these have been a little bit hot and cold all throughout the season, and for Texas Southern, this is a team that they very much pride themselves on defense in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They are currently clocking in 117th at all college basketball, allowing 33.7% away from home. Meanwhile, this is a Jackson State unit that they're going to need to buckle down a little bit more with that regard because they're a bunch that they are 274th in all of college basketball with this regard, but Texas Southern really doesn't have a lot of outside shooters, despite the fact that they've been able to really build themselves up with their offense, 70-plus points in now 5 out of their last 7 games. Meanwhile, you got a Jackson State team that has been a little bit harebrained and crazy in games that aren't involving Mississippi Valley State. They've been able to get to 70 on the regular end. I don't think the bookmakers are quantifying the fact that Texas Southern is actually starting to score points. Meanwhile, Jackson State, they've been able to get to at least 70 in 4 out of their last 5 games. Well, Texas Southern, as a matter of fact, they've gone to at least 73 points in each of their last 5. So, did somebody total 143, looking at the over, and anything north of 3, won't take the points with Jackson State. 306-545, 306-546. Southern and Bethune-Cookman do battle from Birmingham, and with Bethune-Cookman, they are an underdog of between 2.5 to 2 point settles between 130 and 131, and I said Cookman as an underdog of 3.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Southern. Southern has become a top 100 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and Bethune-Cookman, they're great at being able to generate turnovers. Top 25 team with regards to turnovers for us on a per possession basis. If you look at the defense as a whole, though, not necessarily so great. 135th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so to their credit, they're actually giving up 4.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home, and Southern does have their demonstrative home and road splits as well. For Southern, they are giving up about 25 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, but you've got a Bethune-Cookman team that I don't think they're going to be able to take full advantage because this team has been rough with their outside shooting about 31.9% from 3-point range. You've got a trio of guys in Jacoby Heedy alongside Harmon, Deshaun Dyson, who have been able to combine for about 45.5 points per contest, and been able to have Dyson shoot 34.5% from 3, and you've now got a little bit more outside shooting. You've got Reggie Ward popping it at about a 41.5% clip from 3 points. With Bethune-Cookman, though, they don't have a single guy that gives you north of 4.6 rebounds per game, and that's going to match the real kryptonite that you've got for the Southern team. Southern well outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate. Well, Bethune-Cookman, they're able to join that club. They are right around about 291st in all of college basketball. You do have Damani McIntyre with one of the strangest splits you'll ever see. 2.2 steals on 2.8 points per contest, but that said, you've got a Southern team that they've been dealing with a injury to Tayron Joseph. Their top scorer was averaging 20 points per contest prior to him going down, but Hole's been greater than the sum of its parts for the team. Brandon Davis has been able to give you about 12.5 points per contest, and then Diajandi Diomasi, the point guard that comes over from France, 5.5 assists. He's able to give you 9 points per contest and has really been able to do a nice job of cooking recently. A combined 26 assists in the last 4 games. The turnovers, they certainly have been there. This is a Southern team that they turned the ball over about 14 times per contest, but they've been able to get quite a bit more out of some of their ancillary pieces. You're starting to get J. Ron Wilkins to be able to get going a little bit more as well. 5+ points in 4 of the last 5 games, shooting 36% from 3-point range. And I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented battle, despite the fact that both of these teams do play a little bit more up-tempo. And I do think that with Southern, they do find a way to be able to get it done. I do think that this game comes down to late game falling, and with both of these teams having inconsistencies home to road, I do think that they've set this total just a little bit too low. Semi-total 135.5, looking at the over, and with Southern willing to lay up to 3 with them. 306-547, 307, 306, 548. This is from Norfolk, Virginia. It's the MEAC tournament between Morgan State and Howard. Howard is a 5 to 5.5 point favorite. So it's between 145.5 and 146.5. Set Howard as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I also do think that the total is set way too low. Morgan State not playing at the same tempo that they did a season ago. Both of these teams, though, well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Set by total 152.5. I'm looking at the over. Morgan State has been dealing with injuries all season long that has caused them to be a bottom 75 offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But you've been able to have Will Thomas do a nice job giving you double figures. Winston Tabbs is back in the fold. He's been able to give you 15 points. Shoots 35% from 3 points for a Morgan State team that, as a whole, they only shoot about 29.5% from 3 points, but you've got Mr. Hobbs and Cameron Hobbs, who shoots 35.5% from the outside. He's been able to supply this team with about 10 points, 3.5 assists per contest for a Morgan State team that does need to avoid the turnover, 14.5 turnovers per contest, but neither of these teams necessarily do a great job of being able to rip the ball away, and for Morgan State, they're in good form with their offense. 72 plus points scored in 4 of their last 5 games. Last time these two teams played, a combined 150 points up on the board, 78 to 72. Howard was able to win that game they were both of those teams, shot less than 46% from the floor, and you had a combined 44 turnovers. So you're going to get possessions in this game. I think that's going to be a little bit more clean. You got Seth Towns, Bryce Harris for this Howard team, combined for 31 points per contest. They combined between the two of them to be able to shoot in that pocket about 38.5% from 3-point range, and then you've got Mr. Marcus Dockery, who's able to shoot 40% from 3, 13.5 points per contest. Now Howard, they are very loose with the ball. They turn the ball over about 15.5 times per contest, and for Morgan State, they're going to give you a lot of second chances. This is one of the worst defensive rebound rate teams in all of college basketball, bottom 25 one with that regard. And for Howard, this is also a team that they struggle on the glass. They're about 104th in the country with regards to rebound rate. A lot of those are offensive rebounds, so they generate a lot of second chances. They give you a lot of second chances, as well. So I do think that this is going to be an up and down game that Howard is going to be able to pull out in the end. I'm willing to lay up to 6 with Howard, and set my total 152.5. Looking at the over, we're going to have things up with 306, 549, 306, 550. It is South Carolina State taking on Delaware State. Delaware State a 1.5 to a 2-point underdog, total between 135 and 136, and with South Carolina State, set them as a underdog of 2 points. I'm willing to take Delaware State outright on the money line. South Carolina State is giving up north of 18 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And for South Carolina State, it's really hard to win these games when you don't have a single go-to guy on the roster. By that, I mean they don't have a single guy that averages north of 8.5 points per contest. Mitchell Taylor, with 8.5 points per game, leads the way for this team. You've been able to have Davion Everett do relatively solid work down low. He gives you about 6 rebounds per game, but I mean, so much of the success South Carolina State has had has come at home. They turn the ball over 15 times per contest. They shoot about 68.5% the free throw line, 32% from 3, and for Delaware State, you've got 2 guys, Martez Robinson and Javon Munoz, who combine for about 31.5 points per contest. They both shoot north of 35.5% from 3. Now, it's a Delaware State team that they've got their issues when they're away from home as well, but they're a top 125 team with regards to both their rebound rate and their points allowed on a per possession basis. Delaware State has a kryptonite from 3-point range or outside the top 3 with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, but who from South Carolina State is going to be able to knock down those threes or even take those threes? Meanwhile, South Carolina State, they themselves, in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, they're right around about 183rd in all of college basketball. That ascends to about 34.9% away from home. Both of these teams turn the ball over quite a bit, but at the very least, you've got a little bit more facilitation with this Delaware State team. You've been able to have someone in Atavius Tavares be able to give you about 3.5 assists per contest. He's done a nice job with that regard. Wesley Oba being able to chip in their 6 boards per contest should allow Delaware State to be able to win the battle down low and to be able to win this game. I like Delaware State outright on the money line. Semi total 136. You've got a Delaware State team in the top 125 with regards to total possessions per game, and a pair of teams that give it up from 3-point range. So we'll at the over and Delaware State on the money line, and that will wrap things up for the Thursday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GN_41. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated from there. You're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast. Find that 5-star reviews coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.